कुछ भी नहीं है, बस ऊपर से आप लेजर लगाएं लगाएं तो ये काम है, ऐसा नहीं होता है पीडीएफ से खराब आ रहा है पता नहीं। ये वाला ना ऊपर वाला बिल्कुल सही है। चलो हाँ बताइए। We are this afternoon seeing Professor Mohammed Basri, the emeritus professor at the Institute of Agronomy in Veterinary Medicine in Morocco. And it's a pleasure to have Professor Basri. His full CV is in the book you have been provided. So, Professor Basri is your turn now. Thank you.
Dear co-chairs, dear colleagues and friends, first of all, I would like to thank Professor Adnan for inviting me to this very important conference, and also to meet again some friends that I have already met in Rabat. My talk will be on the Montreal Protocol and the ozone depleting substances phased out and the impact of this Montreal Protocol on human, plants, and environment. As you know, the ozone layer acts as a shade or a solar cream protecting man and his environment from the harmful effect of the heat rays. Prolonged exposure to UVB can have serious effects on human health, on plants, on phytoplankton, and on environment, including climate change. A wide range of man-made gases is responsible for ozone depletion. On September 16, 19 1987, governments around the world agreed on the Montreal Protocol to phase out ozone depleting substances, various ozone substances, TFCs, HTC, etc. Therefore, this lecture will address the following points. The first point, just a brief descriptions of ozone and of the ozone layer. What is the human contribution to the ozone depletion? What are the consequences of ozone depletion on human health, on plants, on the environment, marine ecosystem, climate change, etc. And the Montreal Protocol and the ozone depleting substances phase out. And I will give an example, is the methyl bromide phase out. Then the last point will be the Montreal Protocol success. So the ozone layer and the ozone depletion. As you know, ozone is a molecule of 3 oxygen atoms. Most ozones resides in the stratospheric. In the stratospheric ozone layer, which is about 15 kilometers above the Earth's surface, and it's around the entire Earth. The concentrations of the ozone varies with the altitude, as you can see in the graph. UVA, which are the visible light, are not strongly absorbed by the ozone layer, and they are not dangerous, UVA. But the UVB radiation are the most dangerous radiation, is strongly absorbed in the Violet layer, as you can see here in this picture, are strongly absorbed in this layer. And as a result, the amount of UVB reaching Earth's surface is greatly reduced. UVB has serious effects on human health, on plants, phytoplankton, and on environment, including climate change. In 1995, the Paul Cretton, Mario Molina, and Sherwood Rowland got the Nobel Prize in chemistry. In 1974, these 3 scientists, for the first time, demonstrated that the ozone layer depletion by CFCs and in 1995 they got the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Many other gases are also responsible of depleting the ozone layer. These are some examples of gases that are depleting the ozone layer, CFCs, etc., etc. So, all these gases are man-made. These man-made gases are responsible for ozone depletion. For instance, CFCs, where they are not anymore used. Where used in fridge, air conditioning units, plastic foam, and aerosol sprays. These gases are transported high in the stratosphere, where they are broken down by UV radiation, and the reaction releases free chloride, which acts as a catalyst in the ozone destruction. There are other gases such as CFCs, methyl bromide, halon, also deplete the ozone layer. How ozone is depleted, and this is just an example of CFCs. We have here the CFCs. I will not go into details of how the ozone layer, the ozone is depleted. What are the consequences of this ozone layer depletion? Consequences: increased UV, effect on human health, effect on man, humans and animals, and effect on crop production. These are the main effects of the ozone depletion. Effect of the ozone depletion on human health. As you can see in the slide, prolonged exposure to UVB can have serious effects on human health. It can lead to sunburns, cataracts, skin cancer, reduced effectiveness of human immune system, respiratory illness, heart problem, premature aging of the skin, etc. So I'm showing some this disease. An effect of UVB on plants. Reduced photosynthesis, reduced water use efficiency, enhanced drought stress, reduced leaf area, inhibited flowering, reduced dry matter production, reduced yield, increased plant susceptibility to various plant pathogens. This is just an example of the effect of UVB radiation on plants. Example of leguminous plants. It has been reported that significant reduction in total biomass up to 93% photosynthesis, up to 90% and yield up to 60% have been reported. Studies reported also reduction of 62% in methylation, 70% in nitrogen activity, 31% in nitrate reductase activity, 67% in nitrate reduction. And significant negative impact of UVB were also reported on microbial biomass of the rhizosphere. The effect of ozone depletion on marine ecosystems. The UVB can penetrate clear water to a depth of 20 meters. A depth of 20 meters. And they affect the phytoplankton productivity and the damage cells, marine plants, and other microorganisms, protozoa, bacteria, viruses, etc. And the effect of UVB results in a significant reduction in the size of the population of animals that eat this smaller creature. This is just the interaction between the ozone, the UVB, and the ecosystems, the phytoplankton. Now, let us see the slide. We have many gases which are ozone depleting substances. Many gases, methyl chloride, methyl bromide, carbon tetrachloride, methyl chloroform, etc. All these gases are ozone depleting substances. And these gases, for instance, CFC are not anymore used. They have been replaced by HCFC, and HCFC now have been replaced by HFC. But we have an interaction between the ozone depleting substances and the greenhouse gases. For example, N2O is at the same time an ozone depleting substance and also a greenhouse gas. We have HCFCs, ozone depleting substances and also greenhouse gases. That means that there is a big interaction between the ozone depleting substances and the greenhouse gases. CO2 is not an ozone depleting substance. Methane is not an ozone depleting substance. N2 and CFCs are at the same time ozone depleting substances and greenhouse gases. This slide is very, very important, and you will understand later on why. So, because of the danger of this ozone depleting substances, there is a big awareness among the population, and we have here the public awareness has rising with the negative impact of ozone depleting substances and greenhouse gases, as you can see in this slide, danger, bromide, etc. So, the Montreal Protocol now. After this introduction, on September 16, governments around the world agreed on the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Every year, September 16 is observed as the International Day for the preservation of the ozone layer across the world. The celebration is also known as World Ozone Day. And the Montreal Protocol developed a global phase-out schedule of the ozone depleting substances. So, let us have a look to the slide. We can see that in this period, we have a deadline for developed countries and a deadline for developing countries, including, of course, all the Islamic ones. As you can see in the slide, in developed countries, all these gases have been completely phased out. You can see the dates, completely phased out. In developing countries, the phase out came in general 10 years after the phase out in developed countries. For instance, you can say CFCs in developed countries, CFCs have been phased out in 1995, developing countries in 2010. These have been the only gas which still uses is the HCFC in developing countries, and this gas will be completely phased out in 2014. That means that you can see, according to the slide, almost all the ozone depleting substances have been completely phased out in developing countries and in developing countries. If I take the example of methyl bromide has been phased out in 2005 and in Morocco and was then phased out in 2015 in the developing countries. The example of methyl bromide. Methyl bromide was, this gas is not anymore used. Was used in the past. It has been phased out in 2005 in developed countries and in 2015 in developing countries. This chemical is used to control a wide range of pests, weeds, and pathogens present in soils, fungi, bacteria, nematodes, viruses, as well as in post-harvest activities in building of structures to control insects, mites, rodents, etc. And methyl bromide continue to be used in quarantine and in pre-shipment. You can see here some uses of methyl bromide, soil disinfections, lot disinfections, houses disinfections, and commodities disinfection. And methyl bromide is not a greenhouse gas. It is only an ozone depleting substance. So this is the schedule agreed by the Montreal Protocol regarding the phase out of methyl bromide. 2005 phase out with provision for critical use exemptions. I will explain what is the critical use exemption. And it stands for Article 5 countries, including the Islamic countries. The complete phase out was in 2015, except with provision of critical use exemption. What is the critical use exemption? Here, the UNEP has established committees, 5 committees, 12 technical options committees, and medical and chemical technical options committee, refrigeration technical option, and methyl bromide technical option committee. This committee has now 17 members. 17 members that meet twice a year, and 3 co-chairs. We have importer from Australia, which co-chair and expert in all areas of commodity. We have Marta Pizarro from Colombia, who is expert in quality and shipment, and myself, I am responsible of all for soil health. These are the 3 co-chairs of the methyl bromide technical options committee. The role of this technical options committee is to provide recommendations and advice to the party of the technical and economic feasibility of alternatives to these gases. Some technical option committees, example, the methyl bromide technical option committee, has also the task of evaluating critical use nominations submitted by Article 5. Article 5 has been developing countries and non-Article 5 developed countries to the Montreal Protocol. So, in 1997, the parties to the Montreal Protocol recognized a need for transitional access to methyl bromide and adopted a formal decision to allow limited use, critical use exemption. Since 2005, exemptions have been allowed for critical uses in non-Article 5 parties, development countries, and since 2015 in Article 5 parties. There are some conditions for the country to apply for a critical use exemptions, and these are the conditions. Then, twice a year, the methyl bromide technical officers committee evaluate the critical use nominations, and makes recommendations to the meeting of the party, which is organized every year in October, to the meetings of the party, and the MPTOP recommends the full amount requested, reduced the amount, or did not recommend at all the nomination. What are the successes of the moderate? Let us look to the slide. When we started the critical use nomination in 2005, the nomination more than 18,000 tons. More than 18,000 tons. See, here where it went. But now, you can see what that in 2023, almost zero. Almost zero. No material is no size. And the rockaway of the ozone layer, without no protocol, you can see here in E60, no Montreal protocol. The Montreal protocol 1987 with some amendments, 1992, etc. And you can see that the effect on the Montreal protocol on the ozone. A great success also for my department at the Hassan Institute of Hydrology and Veterinary Medicine. So here you can see in 1982, our former king, Hassan II, visited my department. I am in the middle. I was young at that time. I am in the middle. You can see Hassan II visited my department to see what we are doing as research, particularly in the area of proposing, researching alternatives to lithium bromide. And after this meeting, my department received the National Medal of Merit awarded by his son, Mohammed Dissek, for contribution to the Moroccan system of agricultural development, and also because of our research finding and proposing alternatives, we received 2 UNEP awards in 2001 and 2007, and the other one in 2017. This was the 20th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol, and this was the 13th anniversary of the Montreal. And also, because of our research, we also received many awards from associations of fruit, ornamental, and plant growers. These are just some pictures from a vegetable grower. And also Moroccan Association for Plant Protection, etc. So, but this work has been conducted. It's not my work. It is the work of my students, my graduate students, my master students. And these students are coming not only from Morocco, but I can say from all over the world. We have students coming from temperate climates, countries, who work at our alternatives that we have developed in Morocco. They work and we have many scholarships coming from Israel, from UNEP, from UNIDO, from GPZ, etc. to support the students in a sandwich program between Morocco and other countries. And you can see here the temperate countries, and we have students from Africa, we have students from the USA, we have students from Latin America, etc. Working for 3 weeks or few months. And this is what the farmer General Secretary of the United Nations said, perhaps the single most successful international agreement today has been to the Montreal Protocol. And it is much appreciated. There are technically and effective alternatives. The Montreal Protocol is designed as a protocol, and the Montreal Protocol has been ratified and the implementation of the Montreal Protocol has shown that setting strict base outcomes for developing and developing countries has promoted research and innovation of alternatives to the ozone depleting substances and feeding the transfer reception. And this will be the first time in history that humankind has reversed the environmental problem of such magnitude. The Montreal Protocol is considered as one of the most successful and effective environmental treaties ever negotiated and implemented. This is just another recommendation in addition to the other depleting substances and other dangerous chemicals. Currently, about 70 synthetic, highly toxic pesticides to prevent and to the environment have already been banned in the global culture that unfortunately continue to be used in many developing countries, including Islamic ones. Therefore, an agreement and an action plan are needed to reduce this toxic pesticides. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Professor, for your excellent presentation. Very much.
Yeah. If you take that curve of the ozone depletion effect, just flip it around, that's where our greenhouse gases and that resource consumption is at. There is no success at all. Completely successful.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Professor Dr. Zafar Shari. He at present is working as a distinguished professor and conducted at University of Islamabad in Pakistan. He is also vice president of the Islamic World Academy of Sciences. He already has many awards and honors. So I think so. He is already. And now I would request Professor Dr. Shari for his presentation. And now is 11:10. I would request speaker that thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'm really grateful to HJ, Professor Tahar, Islamic Academy, those two young ladies working always pushing us. Thanks a lot. Legally, my time is already finished. But I will try to do something 10-15 minutes, inshallah. So what I'm trying to do is SDGs. And then how academia, they are already doing their bit, but how can we really link all the science? We are working with UNESCO, persuading academia to link science to the society somehow. So this is what, in my humble submission, I'm basically working on plants, indigenous knowledge, traditional medicine, etc. And then from there, that indigenous knowledge taking back to the market. So from what we call it from bench to bed, I remain CEO of a herbal industry. And there we had several products now that are really world-class. So these, I'm going a bit quick, I'm sorry because of time. All these bold SDGs, 17, you know, all of that. They are somehow linked with only today chose one discipline, plant science. And I will be trying to explain these, how are they? For example, if you pick the one, poverty and hunger, 1 and 2. Secondly, when we were working internationally, we all believe that no SDG can be taken alone. Everyone is linked to the other one. almost all 17 of them. And particularly for IAS, the last one is very important. What says is collaboration among different countries, institutions, and all that. This is what where we should be focusing and how can we really relate that. So if you take this, for example, hunger, poverty. So I take your talk the other day from there, and that made my job easy. If you look at the growth, we say, oh, 300 years, we've done something wonderful, humans. But if you look at the reality, every second, 4 people die because of hunger. And then 1% of the world population has the wealth, which is more than the 50% of the bottom poor population of the world. And that 26 individuals have some money, that is more than again that 50% population of the bottom of the world, people that are living in that hunger and poverty. So did you really grow and grow at the cost of whom? That is the question mark, that the majority is still suffering. And I was talking in Cambridge the other day, and I said, sometimes I believe whether we are the same Homo sapiens, because we are treated differently. So that's where we really we have to think about how can these resources, how can that be used. So now, if we talk about plant sciences, again, one more sentence, that all those people that are living in the biodiversity rich area, I take the example of Hindu Kush Himalaya, Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Afghanistan, they're the poorest. And we, have good slogans for them, keep these trees, very good, give you oxygen, takes carbon, etc., etc. But they are dying of hunger. And you're not looking at they don't have anything to survive. So there is that you really, for example, in Pakistan, all the herbs that come to the market and the big industry use it are collected by women and children, those who never been to school. And they don't know anything. And they get some $1 something, and then when you get a compound, this is a long story. Professor Atai is sitting here, and he is the champion in this field. So he can tell you more about it. But that is the reality that we have to, and why we should be using herbal medicine. We all know that. Sometimes it is much better than allopathic medicine, and they are approved. There are some diseases where still the science has to find an answer. And it includes many disciplines. Diabetes is one of them, and then cancer, and then you name it. And there are still questions that science has to find a solution for it. And herbs are still that is. But and while the reasons were the reason, not only these chemicals, but also diet and the regime, what we call, to change people's habits. The youth, what kind of food they use. So if you look at the global burden of diseases, so mainly we come across that it's because of the intake that you take, and that's why, for example, one of the reasons of the next generation that they will be facing is obesity. And this obesity is not only because of excess of food, but lesser amount of food also. It's a different kind of things that and then diabetes and all other things. So if you look at the triad of trouble, that is obesity, conflict, and mental illness. Now, because of the war, because of the terrorism, and all other issues related, humans are really passing through a difficult time. The other day, somebody was explaining us an activity that happened here in Karachi was the reason some kind of mental illnesses of that young MPhil student in the university who blew herself. So that there is that you really, when you talk about all this, and this is not only it is more complex. I will make it more complex for you. Not only indigenous knowledge about plants and other things, it's indigenous languages that are going to, and the UNESCO is working on all this, what we call an ethnologue. Many of the languages are going to be extinct in the next 2 decades because of the influence. For example, my children who have their mother tongue is different, but they don't speak that language anymore. They can't speak it because of the influence of the city where they have to learn Arabic and English and Urdu and blah, blah. And their own language is gone. So that is we also have to, with that language, UNESCO and other experts are worried with the loss of that language, lot of knowledge about science, about about plants, about other things will wipe out. So you will lose a treasure because of whatever you call it, and I take one more example of nutraceuticals. In Pakistan, we are very rich. This is the only country in the world I usually love to say that word from 0 meter to 8,611 meter. The stretch that we go. There is an Everest in Nepal, but they wish to have a beautiful city like Karachi. So this is what we got, the best piece of land Allah has given us, or nature has given us, but we didn't care of it. And because of that, we have a variety of things available for us, biodiversity, and we can take all of this. The other thing, philosophically speaking, Avicenna, who said that either would like to have a short life, but rather than a narrow life. And that's why they say that earlier you live long, you die short, what they call it, and now you are living short. You may have a life, but that life at the end of the day, you are bedridden and you are on the chair and you have a lot of medicine every day. 50-year plus age person, almost average take 3 pills a day somehow for something. So that is you need to consider that. So what I'm taking to another SDG, which is 3 again, safe, effective, quality, affordable medicine. The medicine again, I'm not going into that detail for herbal medicine and homeopathy and all others. There are a lot of discipline. Again, the world is of money. The money that the multinational, I'm sorry to use that, they are doing a good job too. I'm not saying criticizing them, but still, at the cost of, we do something which is really also valuable about plants, about use of plants. In the mountains where there is no pills, they live longer sometimes. Better life, healthy life. So there is, and then when we call about biodiversity loss, some of the traditional healers, they use some kind of animal's brain and animals, different parts of the animals, and then in that case, there's a lot of trade also, and that animals become endangered. So these multiple, because we don't domesticate, we don't grow either wild plants or wild animals, it's just dependent on the whatever lot we have in the wild. This is what I was telling you about the biodiversity rich area. This is poverty index of Pakistani districts. And those areas where there is a very rich area in the Himalayas, in the Hindu Kush, where all the treasure is there, the poorest people live there. The index, they are the poorest in the country. Same is in Balochistan, same is in other areas. So there is that we don't offer them something in return to keep that treasure for us. Another question with this trust was for the terrorism, somehow that's not only linked to religion, it's also linked to economy, to poverty, and to all this. It's believed that in desperation things happen. So if you want to live in peace, you have to look after those people who have nothing to lose with. They blew themselves off. So somehow everything is linked, and you have to really work on it. And that is when you say inclusiveness of involvement, gender, and other. I'm taking SDGs, linking that to this knowledge of plant sciences. So there is the women's rights and girls' rights and all this, and the conflict, terrorism, etc. So if you involve them, if you help them, if you take their knowledge, their collections, and other things, give them some good value, probably they will be a good part of the society and they can be of a great help. I took all these 4 together, which are related somehow to climate change, and I will not talk much about it because we already heard several good things. But the yield, the previous presenter and the earlier, we all knew about it. So let me move on, and then. But what international is saying that we are for sure vulnerable by 2030, we will not be achieving that goals. Those targets that were fixed from MDGs to SDGs and all those goals. But there, we have to have somehow transformed. We have to, change the SDGs with each other, and we have to refocus and involve the academia more. And that transformation again, how can the one be done with the 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? An example, This is how, if you make all this and you involve more literate and more educated people in that, probably the world can get better result out of it. And for example, as I said, one is linked to the another one. For example, SDG 4, if you have very good quality education, that will help you to achieve the other four goals that you have fixed for yourself. Be it poverty, be it health, be it hunger, be it whatever. So economic growth. So what you need to, if you focus on one, you get four others. And sometimes if you focus only on one negatively, for example, climate change, you use coal, you get some energy for the poor people, but at the same time you're destroying nature. So this is how all these are linked. And the thirdly, there was one slide in it, what we call it One Health. If you have to consider all this, and I'm keeping time in mind, chairperson, so don't worry about that. If you talk about the health of the human, you have to consider the health of the planet. Human, animals, environment, biodiversity, humans, and environment. What we call it One Health. And our academy has done a lot with US Academy awareness raising and all this, because now the disease is corona. I don't want to indulge in a debate whether it came from and how it came from and all this. Species barrier crossing of the pathogens from one species to another. So there are several questions that are because of the humans, things happen either intentionally or unintentionally. So that too, we somehow do. Of course, we know the problems with indigenous knowledge or traditional medicine that are there, a number of them. And I would be requesting the authorities to somehow, if you could focus. Now you have happy to learn that our traditional medicine department or system thing. So what we need is that we have to have not only research at one time, but you need to do several things: awareness, mistrust of people, and all this. If you link all this, maybe you can get better result for your product, and you can have some. This is what I said about the diversity fund. This is how we push why people are reluctant to use herbal medicine from collection to the consumer. Even for the collection, for example, as I said, young children and women, they go to the mountain and they just pick and mix it. Earlier, there were environment-friendly sacks available to them. Now it's the plastic sack, and half are die on the way, and then they mix, and you get something which you don't know even. There was a study in UK. The tea that they were drinking has several species mixed with it, which was sometimes injurious too. But they collected, they put, and sometimes mistakenly there were 24 species were reported from our tea bag beside the tea. So that is that if you are taking something, how could you be sure that the product that you want? So for that, you have with WHO also we are working, and there are several. We need a legislation, of course, and we need to have to focus on these things. Thanks that here, at least in Pakistan, one organization, clinical trial, they have very successful trials started already. And I would be requesting to have some for the national interest, even if you don't earn money, to do something on the herbal medicine too, so that we have policy for it, we have safety efficacy issues resolved. And this is not only for plants. This is, for example, this amphibian species. They are used, and their skin has a very good zigonotype, which is 1,000 times more potent than morphine, for example. So there are a lot of treasure available for you in this biodiversity. And now in Australia, New Zealand, they have for the knees from the plants. They get something that you don't need to operate, and your knees are, what they call it. Scaffolds that they made from plants. A very new field, and people are working on it. And then mathematicians and biologists are working on quantitative biology, and they are finding things for the common use of the common man. Endophytic, very quickly in a minute or so, this is not only the plant that helps. This is inside, like your biome, microbiome has thousands and millions of microorganisms, same as in plant. And those sometimes it's not the plant that is helping you, it's the microorganism that is helping you. And begonia, one of the species for breast cancer, we found out that there was a fungus inside which helps you. And Dr. Shad is already working with us. We are working jointly on nanoparticles of that, and that helps you. This is that species begonia, which is very common in Pakistan for breast cancer. Already UK group found some compound, but ultimately we found that there was a fungus inside that really inhibits growth of cancer cell in the breast, and that helps a lot. There are several use of endophytic microorganism. I will not go into those details. Nanoparticles already, maybe Dr. Shah and Dr. Shah skipping all this. What is it? How it works? And all this. How can you get some good products from the nanoparticles? Its applications. And how can it clean the waste product, and how can you really use all this antibiotic resistance, etc. Time is running out, so I'm just closing it. Science and inequality. This we are today talking in our council and general body too, that we have to really take some of the scientists. They are too brilliant, but they don't get a chance because of several issues that also we need to address. I give you an example of Afghan children. In one of the village, all the male of that village had sold their kidneys just to survive to that by food. All one village. And now the female are selling it, their bodies, their parts. So that is that financial crisis, it's a huge report and a slap on humanity on what's happening there. So we should be somehow, today we are discussing the refugee scientists from several countries like Syria, like, Lebanon and several other countries that we have to really think about that, how can we work together. So the last SDG, that is the collaboration, we really all need to have to work. We have resources, some has the lab, and there is where we can work. So for us is either we have business as usual, some good air condition that stops bad air from outside, you live inside, or we take everybody along and we think that we are the Ashraful Makhluqat, and we have the responsibility to look after. And the answer for all this is the leadership in the old civilizations, the new way of thinking in China, that they think that the old civilization has answer to the critical question we are facing now. Of course, we can talk about modern science of vaccine, etc. But I stop here. This is my lab that works on interdisciplinary in Qatar University. From Ibrahim Express we started, and then we are now here. So, if you want to achieve those SDGs, we recommend that academia is the main pillar to help you, to somehow guide you to get it. Some lessons from my student always I do. You can read it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is from Bangladesh. He always talks about aspects of biomedical and health-related research, which are quite important nowadays. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and Assalamu alaikum. I would like to start by thanking Professor Attaur Rahman and Professor Iqbal Chaudhary and the beautiful team for excellent hospitality as usual, and also to IAS officials for giving me the chance to talk on this issue. Actually, if we recollect from yesterday, right from the speech of Professor Iqbal Chaudhary, welcome speech, and Professor Attaur Rahman's speech, also Professor Badran's speech, and excellent presentation by our friend Michael, and also from Dr. Bhutta, right to the lecture right now, Professor Jatta. The recurrent theme is that yes, there are some problems in science and technology development. The recurrent theme is inequality, climate crisis, poverty. In spite of excellent development in science and technology, something is wrong in this development model. And because this injustice cannot be the aim for any scientific or technological. So in my talk, it will be related to health, but actually this is related to overall economics and politics. What is wrong in the scientific model of this development, while health is one of the major victims? Health is a very touchy issue because it affects human life and death, and it is very emotionally charged. So that's why when you talk about health, it actually speaks so many things. And Professor Jatta rightly showed, and also Professor Bhutta told, that yes, number 3 is health and well-being in SDG, but it relates to so many other, SDGs. In any case, like Mrs. Banjani said, that we have to have some introspection. And if we look at that, one missing thing is ethics. Something is wrong in this development model because we have divorced economics and politics from ethics, and only we have relied on science and technology, which has been thought as a miracle for human development. So this is the missing link. And if we look at the current pandemic, it has an opening role, opening of the eyes. The role played by the pandemic has shown us in a very short time that how important are ethical issues in health and overall human development. Unfortunately, we are not learning. We have not, learned much from this pandemic. We are in the same old game, I should say. But maybe if we start learning, that would be much, much better for human in future. So I don't have to explain that this COVID-19 pandemic created an unprecedented health and economic challenge. We are all sufferers of that. And I think, as I say, at the same time, it has opened the ethical crisis debate. There were some justified dilemmas in ethical decision making during this process, because sometimes during the earlier pandemics, these issues were not so prominent. For example, the physicians, there were problems in the duty versus right-based moral values. For example, in particularly developing world, we did not have enough personal protective equipment in the beginning, at least in the beginning months in Bangladesh and many other countries I know, there were shortage of PPEs, quality of personal protective equipment. So any physician or healthcare provider was exposed to great risk, great personal risk. And when he goes back to family, because they have family also, and the family members could be at great risk. So if you think from a right-based ethics, which is the dominant ethics in a legally governed society, if you think from the right-based society, the healthcare providers, they have the right to not to attend the hospital, not to attend the patient, because this infectious disease, he can carry to the family, to his near and dear ones, apart from himself. So from a right-based ethics, it was right not to go to the hospital or somehow, dose their responsibility. You could not really say much about the ethical aspect on that part. But if you talk from a duty-based ethics, that's something different, because certain duty-based ethics tells whatever happens to you, you cannot just get away from a patient. Because of the shortage of personal protective equipment and many other preservation of self and family is a right of that individual. And we were really, I was one of the public health advisors of the government, and we were in a very, very difficult position sometimes. What to do really, because if we, have stringent punishment for the providers who are neglecting their in their work, it could be legally okay, but ethically may not be right. That's a very big dilemma which we faced. Again, if we look at some other issues in a more collective way, for example, if you have scarcity of ICU bed or ventilator or high flow nasal cannula, essential items, even in a developed society, they faced it because it is so much rush with a very, very advanced countries. They faced it, the scarcity, and in our part of the world, it was very common. Now, a very aged person needs a ICU bed or a high flow nasal cannula or a ventilator. He has comorbidity. Aging itself is a big risk, and he is, more likely to die, even if we put in an ICU bed. Then there is a younger person who has the, same kind of problem. He also needs an ICU. What to be done? Because he has more chance to live. But ethically, it's very difficult to decide, because should we keep that man alive, or should I prefer the more vulnerable person? So these are very, very difficult choices. Law cannot solve it. This is difficult by only a legal framework. And physicians and managers were in a dilemma to solve this complex issue. So that brought the revival of the traditional ethical debate. Because the self-centered nature of individual human beings, basically there are human beings who are self-preservation is the first, ethics for that individual. But then I just say there are three basic types. I'm not going into the theoretical debates, because theoretically there are three types: utility-based, duty-based, and right-based. So there are more also, in a wider social perspective, the debates became again very, very important. And also this brought into a picture which we have been, hearing for the last 2 days, the market economy and associated neoliberal ethical principles. We always consider that this pandemic is due to a biological agent, SARS-CoV-2. Actually, the ground has been prepared by our actions. Like the climate crisis has been created by human actions. Actually, the ground has been created by the globalized market economy, which has, transformed health into a commodity, just a commodity like other commodities. And this is a marketable commodity. And this has gone beyond to the what is called a neoliberal ethics, neoliberal economic policy, where it is thought that market itself is a good judge, good balancing factor. By demand and supply theory, the market will itself create a harmony and a justice in the society. This is a wrong concept which has been revealed by this time. And this has exposed the character even of the very developed societies like USA. Yesterday, we heard from Dr. Bhutto a very, important information which we have been thinking quite a lot, that why advanced countries like USA with so many technologies, so much wealth, did so worse in managing this crisis compared to even, for example, the underdeveloped countries. You heard that OIC countries, although lagging behind much in achieving the SDG universal health coverage, but they did quite well in the climate crisis. This is a paradox. For COVID-19 crisis. Yesterday we heard that we did better, the YC countries, in managing the COVID-19 crisis. It is same for the, even for the underdeveloped or developing nations in general. And if you take even India, the case fatality rate, what is case fatality rate? That if you diagnose 1,000 cases, 100 cases, what is the fatality rate? The fatality rate one in Gujarat or in Delhi was about 2.5. Kerala, which is richest areas of the India, lot of wealth. But Kerala is a poorer state compared to them, but it had only 0.5. So even within the country, there are a lot of variations in the case fatality rate. That creates a very interesting observation that science and technology with a lot of wealth, lot of advanced equipment and facilities may not be enough to manage such a crisis, then something is wrong in that model. So this happens that actually during this crisis, we saw many ultranationalism. Some countries accumulated 5 times PPEs, 5 times vaccine compared to many other countries around the world. They showed ultranationalism in distribution of vaccines, etc. And ultimately, we saw this inequality. The poorest are the most sufferers with this. All measures, poorest and marginalized societies were the sufferers, not only for the disease, for the economic impact, for the education. And also the health and socioeconomic inequality rather increased. We thought this pandemic will teach us, but what has happened after the pandemic, the data shows that some people have accumulated, some companies, some countries, some societies have accumulated large amount of wealth. Inequality has increased and many have become poorer and poorer. So this is something which creates a question regarding the ethical arena. And we have seen some of the approaches, ethical approaches. The Western democracies follows mostly liberal approaches. And with certain exceptions in general, ultimately, those democracies actually did a little bit, better, relatively less better than authoritarian countries in the beginning. I said in the beginning, but they had at least compatible ethical principles. Populist approaches utter failures, like we remember Trump's popular approach and many others' popular approach. Populist approach. There were authoritarian approaches, like in China. It initially became successful, but ultimately it rebounded. So it is also, I think, and all these approaches as if these are tools, sometimes some of the governments try to play with it because with this suppression, they could suppress the other voices, democratic voices or other, different voices. And the problem lies with individual versus state dilemma as usual. So it is very important to have, as I say, inspection, like what happened for the YC countries, for example, and for the other advanced countries, what can be all of the factors. I'm tempted, I said I'm tempted, but still we need to do certain homeworks and other works. Tempted to feel that still in those countries, there is a community engagement feeling. There are some ethics of responsibility, ethics of duty. Still, we care for our elders, we care for our family, more compared to other civilizations. In normal time, this caring might not be visible, but during the crisis period, extreme crisis, I think these values worked. These ethical principles worked of a duty-based, responsibility-based ethics. Duty and responsibility may come from religion or may come from other sources. It doesn't matter. Whatever is the source of this feeling of duty or responsibility, that works in a society. And that should not be divorced from any economics and any development. Technology, we can create robots, we can create lots of AIs, but we cannot create an ethical robot. We can put certain functions, certain programs to behave in certain ways during certain crises. But whatever we try, we cannot create an ethical robot. They cannot decide about values. They cannot decide about ethics. This was realized much before. In fact, in a famous dialogue by Plato, there is a dialogue called Meno, very excellent dialogue. In Meno, Socrates was ultimately, teaching his disciples, and finally it showed that ethics is never teachable. You cannot really create an ethics by education and teaching. It is something which has to come from certain sources, be it supernatural, metaphysical, be it through your human actions. But it is not like that you just program in a robot. Anyway, we had also, for researchers, scientists, we have a lot of ethical dilemma in conducting research because we had to shortcut. Normally, when we pass through an ethical, process, ethics review committee, there are lots of steps we follow. But for vaccine development, for many others, even for peer-reviewed process, we had so-called preprints, which was really, too much during this period, and we had to certain kind of hasty clinical trial challenge studies in the beginning, which is not really ethically sound, but we had to take different actions during this period. So this is also in research, health research or medical research. And I am not going into the many other points because time is short. Probably So there are in health there are utility, well-being, benefits, harms, etc. There are fairness points. There are freedom. So there are certain issues which already are accepted in health, and we have public health ethics, need for evidence, list restrictive alternative, list harmful alternative. Look, we had lockdowns. We did not really realize how much harm we are doing to the children at the cost of the saving the old, how much really doing for the next generation, how much we are really harming the poorer people in the economics. We took for granted certain actions. These are some of the issues because we did not bother for any ethical aspects. Proportionality, equity, reciprocity. There are certain issues which we did not bother, and I'm going fast. For example, just to give an example, this is something which was in Australia, lockdown in Victoria, but New South Wales decided to softer and later lockdown. Same variant, same agent, similar kind of condition and similar times. You see, these two options are played by two different states. And outcome, not much difference. So there are issues now questioned that what happened when you go for a stricter lockdown and when you go for a softer approach. So this is called the least alternative approach. We have ethics about least restrictive alternative, least harmful alternative. They were not really played properly. So this is in a way health is a medical crisis, a biological crisis. It is also an ethical crisis, and not only health. As I said in the beginning, the whole human development is now an ethical crisis, and this science and technology itself is not sufficient to really solve that because it cannot solve all the problems. So I think this has to be operationalized. We need to have inclusion of ethics people in decision-making process, not like I'm just switching on during the crisis. It has to be a continuous process in science and technology, in policy making, in organizational, in government decisions. And in conclusion, I would like to request organizations like IAS and Comstech to give their attention in this direction, that ethics is very, very important in our development. Thank you very much.
Very much, Professor.
Next is our friend Dr. Abdullah Mirza, very well known as the Director General of the Islamic Sciences. Lot of experience and lot of management in education and research. His full CV is available with you. So Dr. Abdullah, please, yes.
Okay, I would like to thank you, Dr. I intend please that I be strategically put the last speaker so that I can get more time. And well, my speech is going really to be an advocacy for biodiversity as an asset for sustainable development in economical point of view. My speech will be divided into 5 areas: the difference between biodiversity, economics, and standard, characteristic of natural capital and its goods and services, mechanism of delivery, the ecosystem and the biodiversity, then the economics of natural capital, the demand, the supply, and the impact inequality, equality, and ecological footprint. Then the 4th one will be the inclusive wealth and portfolio management. And the last question: are UN SDGs achievable by 2030? Quantitative element. I don't think so. The biodiversity economics consider the biosphere as an asset, a self-regenerative asset also, with the humans as part or integral part of it. Since the biosphere is inherently bounded, the global output of goods and services, or the GDP, are inevitably bounded. The standard economics, however, use the biosphere as an arena to accumulate produced capital and human capital, as indicated by GDP and HDI, while ignoring the natural capital. The limited view of the face of nature in economy can be traced to the World Bank 1992, which propagated the cosmic curve, which illustrated that the emission of sulfur dioxide is related to GDP per capita in the form of universe U. Of course, emission of sulfur dioxide is not representative of ecological harm. Consider destroying the mangrove impact on the coastal erosion, or in jeopardizing the communities by tsunami. Consider the loss of goods and services, water threats for downstream farmer and forest being destroyed for life. The development economists thought that because there is no obvious limit in human ingenuity, technical progress, and institutional improvement can enable global output of final goods and services to grow in the community. This has been illustrated or proved in 15 times increase in global GDP over the past 70 years. But this has been translated into ecological footprint that exceeds the biosphere ability to deliver its goods and services on a sustainable basis. The development economists stipulated that the global population and the global output, or both, would increase with extra demand on the biosphere if we are able to increase the rate of science invention and technology innovation coupled with the proper policies and institutional correspondingly. This notion advocates the idea of indefinite economic growth, which is encountered in the literature and the economy with climate change. climate change. They are talking about decarbonizing the economy, raising the supply of biosphere, GS, to genetic manipulation or other things, to technology and institution to bridge the gap in the inequality equation. This time. However, the biodiversity economics consider humanity as embedded in the biosphere. It says that the global population and the global output cannot be increased indefinitely. It is instead bounded. It involves a dynamic resource allocation program. The demand we are making on the biosphere does not have to equal the biosphere ability to supply goods and services, because the difference is naturally accommodated by a change in the biosphere stock. A nation could choose to grow on the biosphere and use the goods and services it supplies so as to accumulate, produce, and human capital. This is the core of the economic development and the standard economy. The biodiversity economics calls for proper management of the whole capital portfolio, taking into account that most of the natural capital goods and services come free or cheap, so they don't appear scarce to private entity or a person. This even gets forced by government subsidies, such as institutional imperfections, create a gap between the prices, the market price of goods and services, and their social worth, the accounting price. These in turn create disparity between private incentive and the public aspiration. The economic value of the biosphere in an attempt to persuade the skeptics, the global flow of goods and services was estimated towards the end of the 20th century worth of $16 to $56 trillion annually, with an average figure of about $33 billion. This figure is larger than the global national product in the mid-1990s, which is estimated at the time to be $18 trillion annually. Now, let's go to the other segment of the presentation. The characteristic of natural capital and its roots and the mechanism of the revenue. Natural capital is similar to produced capital in being consumed and depreciated, but it is durable, regenerative. However, their regenerative capacity may slow down or cease abruptly at a tipping point without warning, as a result of continuous cumulative site disturbance. Number two, natural capital as a source is accounted for biodiversity economy as social scarcity value that contributes to the wealth along with the produced capital and human capital. Three, most of natural capital is free at the source and undervalued and open to all, rendering it vulnerable to degradation due to overuse or misuse. Institutional failure, the characteristic of natural capital being mobile, silent, and invisible, or being subjected to inadequately enforced or weakly defined property rights, contribute to this end. Production and consumption possibilities involving biosphere are characterized by non-linearity. That's why market price is not functional here. The biosphere's regeneration is carried out through the ecosystem processes and functions, and these constitute the key to sustainability. Biodiversity decline disrupts these processes, such as these governing the climate system. Thus, the economics of biodiversity is the economics of the biosphere, which combine a biotic environment and the self-organizing, regenerative, functional biotic form that control the flow of energy, nutrients, and organic matter. Ecosystems are thus constitute a capital goods. Like produced capital, they depreciate if they are misused or overused but they differ from the produced capital in three ways. Depreciation in many cases is irreversible, or at least can take previous work and long time to recover, not to repeat, because it is not possible to replicate repeated or degraded ecosystem. But we can recover it, however. Ecosystems can collapse abruptly without much prior warning. Ecosystems regenerate by a function and processes that are non-linear and are mediated by biodiversity, which connect biotic and non-biotic components of ecosystem by nutrient cycles and energy flow, and form the basis for ecosystem productivity and resilience. Biodiversity reduce uncertainty under stress condition akin to biodiversity in financial portfolio. Variation along diverse species and within species will increase the capacity of the ecosystem resilience to shock. Some species have obscure presence, but become prominent once the dominant species became weak due to disturbance. An example is otters, erkins, kelps, and fish. Overhunting of the otters will increase the erkins that will feed on the kelp forest, barren sea, no fish. Plays a complementary role in the ecosystem productivity through various functional groups and traits through mutual dependence among species. It is an analogous to complementarities among input industrial production. If one component is lacking, the whole process will come to halt. From our point of view, biodiversity exerts non-linear impact on the ecosystem productivity, where it declines at accelerated rate as biodiversity loss increases. In addition, loss of biodiversity across trophic levels has the potential to influence ecosystem function even more strongly than diversity loss within trophic level. If you divide an ecosystem into parts by creating barriers, the sum of the parts will be typically lower than the productivity of the whole, like establishing dams, fragmentation, transport corridors, and so on. That might lead to an extension of some species. Non-linearity is a reason markets are inadequate system for institution for protecting the biosphere from overuse, or ensuring that our consumption and investment decisions are based on reflective balance between our own well-being and the well-being of the next generation. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment recorded by biodiversity loss in the last 3 decades as follows: 50% of marshes, 35% of mangrove, 40% of beaches. Buccini estimated that forests captured around 435 million tons of carbon annually, but lost 860 million tons, 70% of which is due to deforestation and land degradation. Biodiversity is maximized at intermediate level of disturbance due to successional sequence, where species state of colonization ability with competitive advantage until the climate species take over. Unfortunately, increasing level of disturbance can drive the system backwards to low diversity. Resilient ecosystem harbor redundancy, where species sit in the wings, like spare capacity in economic production system. Reduced variation means reduced capacity for adaptation and consequent loss of resilience. Ecosystem occur in different stability regimes, where the stability regime states are well defined We know them. But the uncertainty lies in the location of the state that separate these regimes. So the magnitude of disturbance that ecosystem can tolerate before it moves to a different stability regime could be determined, could not be determined exactly. This is an example of a simple ecosystem where we have different stability regimes or two stability regimes. This stability point here and the carrying capacity here. And disturbance or fishing might decrease the population, but if it reaches this point, the population will be diminished. This is a turning point, tipping point of the system. So we know that there is stability regimes, more than one stability regimes as a matter of fact, an ecosystem. And the ecosystem can move from one to one unless it reaches that point where it is being collapsed completely. Some example of extreme disturbance in the ecosystem, sea otter, as we mentioned before, and fish and airplane. Introduction of non-native species may change their composition and reduce the resilience of the ecosystem, like the Nile port perch, a predatory fish that had been introduced to the Lake Victoria in 1950, decimated all native species. Econometrics of natural capital definition, before we go into more numerical values. The market price, you know the market price. The accounting price is the price that reflects the true value to the society of a good and service or asset. It augments value of externalities that emanated from the destruction or degradation of natural capital. Our behavior or our, doing things, we have externalities. Like somebody is smoking, he can cause harm to others. This is externality, this is the price. The inclusive wealth is the aggregate value of the nation, produced capital, human capital, and natural capital. The changes in the inclusive wealth can point to the status of sustainable development. Ecological footprint is identified as a ratio between demand and supply of the ecosphere. The supply. The supply is the regenerative rate of the biosphere, the GS, which is a function of the biosphere stock. GS can be affected by policy. Example, transplanting heat-tolerant corals for more survival under teaching conditions. This is good. Importing foreign species into ecosystem may result in unintended detrimental consequences. Intervention involving using genetically modified crops is controversial. So we can increase the supply of the ecosphere by interfering. The demand. Humanity exerts its impact on the biosphere through the global population. Individual demand on the biosphere proxied by GDP per capita, that is the standard of living or the consumption, by technology and institution, alpha, which is a numerical value of the efficiency with which the goods and services are converted into GDP and the extent to which the biosphere is transformed by global waste. The demand is NY over alpha. That is, the demand is a function of the population and its activity or consumption, which inevitably associated with waste and inversely related to alpha. In fact, inequality occurs when the demand surpasses the GS, when it is more than the regenerative ability of the ecosphere. The left side is the impact The right side is the supply. If the global impact exceeds the biosphere regenerative rate, the biosphere stock diminishes as a result of the presence of the gap between I and G. So we can use the stock rather than the yield. The impact equality, the condition under which we can attain sustainable development, points to the ways in which we stabilize the biosphere stock. This requires that the impact must equal the biosphere regional rate. That is, NY over alpha must equal GS. The many paths that we ought to achieve this becomes a dynamic portfolio management program that must satisfy arbitrage condition among all assets considered. Inclusive wealth and portfolio management. The inclusive wealth is the social value of an economic portfolio of capital goods. It is the sum of accounting values, not the market value, the accounting values of produced capital, human capital, and natural capital. Inclusive wealth should be the instrument to evaluate economic change. The social well-being is maximized if the inclusive wealth is maximized. The society would raise its inclusive wealth and thereby its well-being by improving its environment or institution and practices with regard to protecting the environment. Then we are talking about two equities, the wealth and the well-being. The biodiversity economics apply the well-being equivalence theory, which requires that the policy analysis at a point of time to evaluate alternatives to which capital goods and yield can be put for sustainable assessment, which measure prosperity does not mean high GDP as reflection of the quality of life or the well-being. Its task is to weigh change in the asset structure. So the study of biodiversity economics becomes the study of inclusive capital portfolio, produced, human, and natural, under arbitrage conditions. Comparing the assets in the portfolio employs using its own rate of return, the yield. But this is misleading, since it does not account for depreciation of the capital. Or yet, we can use the rate of return, which means its yield plus appreciation or depreciation of the capital. This value then measures the wealth, which is calculated on the basis of the accounting price, but not the market price. The arbitrage condition at the local level. The portfolio manager, the government, for instance, will not choose an asset with lower rate of return than others. Let's assume the asset is a mineral deposit of a forest. Yes, and the market price for the mineral is X, that its yield. However, its accounting price or rate of return is the market price X plus Y, where Y has a negative value due to externalities created by the environmental damage. So the market price of mineral is below what it should be. It should include also the externality price. The ideal situation is achieved when the market value of the portfolio would equal its accounting value, but this is not the case because private incentives, companies, and persons and social imperatives differ. So the agent's task is to put into practice policies that bring the two into alignment as close as possible. This is done by using accounting price as an option to act as a proxy for inclusive wealth to maximize social well-being. At the global level, assets, yeah, I just have 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Oh. Okay, I can skip something else. I will talk about, I skip some slides. The rate of return of primary contribution, planetary net productivity, the plant productivity estimated at the end of the 20th century to be 105 trillion kilograms per year. That's the work of Field et al. 1988. Global stock biomass is 550 trillion kilograms per year. The biosphere average yield on that stock is 19% per year. Jordan et al. Estimated the long-run global yield on produced capital, okay, to be around 5%. This does not account for depreciation. Now, if we are prudent in managing our portfolio, here we are making yield of 5%, here 19%, which means we are overusing the stuff. Because it should be 5%. We are overusing our biosphere by 14%. Now, the last thing I would like to talk about is, are the UN SDG achieved by 2023? There are some given data. The impact quality offers a way to devise policies and behavioral changes required to achieve UN SDGs by 2030. Are these achievable? It's calculated. The Global Footprint Network, which is a ratio between the demand and supply, could be calculated. Walker-Nagel and Bears calculated that the global ecological footprint increased from 1 in 1970 to 1.7. That means we need more 1 year. This means that the ratio increased at an average annual rate of 1.1%. The global GDP has increased since 1970 at annual average rate of 3.4%. The global natural capital decline per capita was estimated to be 40% between 1992 and 2014. Accordingly, this is a decline of 1.1. Now, the global ecological footprint to be calculated according to the Glasgow formula, which states that the global or the change or the percentage change of the global footprint equals the global change or the annual change of the consumption minus the annual increase of technology and institution minus the what I want to say that the current increase of technology and institution is 3.5%. Okay, and what we need if we want to reduce the ecological footprint from 1.7 to 1, that is sustainable development, we need an increase in institution and technology about 10%. Even if we stop, if we did not increase our consumption at all, we need an increase in the institution and technology of 5.5%. This is not achievable. We cannot achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We are now to continue this session. for the shortage of time. We hand over to the chairs now to Dr. Shadi Anju and Dr. Radha Tagli. Thank you.
Yes, maybe not. I don't want to open. I just want to put it in the. You will keep my back.
May I ask everyone to take their seats? I'm not Dr. Hadida Yusuf, I'm Dr. Nadia Hussain from Standard
Yes.
and last minute Hill. Let's get started with the session. I'll ask my co-chair to start with the first. The first speaker today.
I want also to open another one, if you don't mind.
This session, I think
It's okay. I just want to point something in the other slide. You can go to my.
He's from.
Oh no, back, and here.
He's President.
Yes. To show something.
Session has started.
With the other one. I want the other one. We want one. Yes. How to use this? Forward, backward, and this is. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, I would like to thank the chairman of this conference and everybody attending this session for giving me this chance to present this work, and when to take a permission from the chair of the session to just point out, I think, because today is the 8th of March, the Women's Day. It's not part of my presentation, but I want to point something. If we look at this graph, it has been taken from Cosmos. It's a German magazine issued by Alexander from Humboldt. It shows that these are the men climbing to the top of science, and this is the woman in the other side, where it shows there's a lot of difficulties that the woman faces compared to the men. It doesn't say, the picture doesn't say that the men is easy life, but just say that the woman has to do more work to get to the same point that the men can go. And I added this chain in the leg of the lady, and this is to present that any woman in the third world country, or least advantaged countries, will have more easy difficulties to climb this mountain. So what I wanted to show, because today it's a Women's Day, and here many elite persons and influential persons, I would like to ask you all to give your hands to your female students, female colleagues, help them to reach to good positions. I mean, they have the potential, but maybe they need more assistance. And we can tell that there's not enough support for the women. If we think about the chairs of all conferences in the world, mainly are men. Chairs of universities mainly are men. Editorial boards are mainly men. So I really thought about I should give this point to you. I know that you try your hard, but also I would ask you politely to help your female students, female colleagues, to be part of your activities. If you are chairman of a conference, why you don't have your vice chairman as your female colleague? If you are a board member or the editorial board of a journal, why don't give a chance for the females around you as students or colleagues to be part of this editorial? And that's all. Thank you. And I will go to my talk now. So today my talk is about it's about metamaterials, and this kind of materials which is natural, man-made, and it has a lot of advantages over the naturally made materials that we can tune its characteristics very easily, and so that we can widen the applications of these materials. So they are made in experiments and in the laboratory. And after I introduce these materials, I will talk a little bit about what I have used in materials in my research. So these materials, as I said, they are engineered materials, they are man-made materials, they're made in the laboratory, and they have various applications. If we want to compare them with naturally occurring materials, they have atoms which have been arranged periodically, and the distance between these atoms has a lot to do with their application. Usually, these distances differ the wavelength of the visible light, and the incident light experience in general distribution materials. Metamaterials also they have this kind of structure, theoretical or theoretical, and the unit which is between the distance between each unit has a lot to do with their properties. These materials have been fabricated a lot in the laboratories, and there are many ways to fabricate them, and they are not available. They are all presented in the picture. So what is electromagnetic materials? It's a composite or structural material that is not found in naturally occurring materials or compounds. They are periodic with periodic sub-wavelength metal structure. The electromagnetic material properties are derived from its structure. So the structure has to do a lot with their properties, not from inheriting combustion like neutron material. And they also call double negative materials, and they have electromagnetic properties that are distinct from any new material, and hence are examples of these materials. So what is meta? Meta is altered, changed, or higher beyond. Metamaterials, distinct materials, only except a small subset of electromagnetic particles theoretically available. Metamaterials can have their electromagnetic particles elsewhere to something beyond what we can find in nature. Can achieve negative refractive index, zero index diffraction, magnetism, and optical effects. So this guy, Zalbo, he's the first to talk about metamaterials. He said why we don't have materials with negative refractive index, such as they have negative permeability and negative permeability. And that was in 1968 in his published paper, which has been reached maybe 2000 citation. And in 1999, an experimentalist, John Gilby, he proposed an experiment where they can fabricate these materials in the laboratory. In 2000, they achieved this goal, and they experimentally fabricated metamaterials. Can we really have a negative refractive index? So what are we really interested about the refractive index? Because if we want to understand how we are evaluating media, we have to think about the refractive index. So how we do this interaction between water and waves by solving Maxwell's equations, and we reach this equation which we call field equation. And these two equations, they have these parameters, the permittivity and permeability, which has a lot to do with the refractive index. Well, the refractive index is the square root of mu r epsilon r, where this is the relative permeability, relative permittivity, which is just mu over mu on space or air, epsilon divided by epsilon naught. So these are epsilon r and mu r. And this also related to this epsilon mu relative to the propagation constant, which is just a frequency and square root of epsilon in mu. So how can we get a negative refractive index if we have both negative? We have mu negative and epsilon negative. So let's assume this assumption that we have a material with a mu minus 1 and epsilon relative mu minus 1 and relative epsilon minus 1. So this is the square root of mu, which is minus 1, epsilon minus 1, but we know that minus 1 is exactly e to the minus j pi. And minus mu is e to the minus j pi under the square root. I can distribute the square root. So it will be e to the minus j pi over 2, e to the minus j pi over 2. And multiplication means add the power. So we'll have e to the minus j pi, which is exactly minus 1. So it's achievable. If we have both mu and epsilon negative, we can achieve a negative refractive index material. So it's only occurred if we have both negative. If we have one of them negative, we can't achieve negative refractive index because we have imaginary. If one of them is negative, but both should be negative to achieve negative refractive index. One of them is negative is occurring in nature. It's not something new. It's naturally occurring if one of them is negative. For example, negative epsilon, it's occurred in metals like gold and silver and aluminum. Negative mu occurs in resonant ferromagnetic systems. So if we go to the mu epsilon space, I divide the space to epsilon mu, and this are our refractive index definition, which is called epsilon mu. So in this region where we have both mu and epsilon boosted, we have a propagating waves, and this is the standard optical materials. If we have one of them negative, like in this case, we have negative epsilon, positive mu. We have metals, as I just mentioned, like silver and gold, and it works in ultraviolet optical region where they have negative epsilon, and we don't have propagating wave. We have different waves. And this region in the space where we have negative mu, positive epsilon, we also don't have propagating wave. We have different waves. And these natural magnetic materials, as I said, like ferromagnetic materials, it's up to gigahertz. And this is space where we have both negative. We have epsilon negative and mu negative. We have the propagating waves. So the wave can propagate in this media, even though we have both negative, because here we have negative refractive index. Here we call it a phase, positive phase waves. Here we call negative phase. Here is we call it forward, and I will explain it, and this is backward waves. And also I have one that also this region, because the naturally occurring materials, we will always say the refractive index should be greater than 1. So for material with refractive index less than 1, it's also metamaterial. So think about this. If we have an empty glass, and I have this straw or a spoon, and the light will come through, and I will see the spoon like this. The light will not hit anything, it's just going through the air inside the glass. But if we assume that we have filled the glass with water, normal water, with a refractive index 1.3, which is greater than the refractive index which is 1. The light will come and it will refract, obeying Snell's law, which says n1 sin theta 1 equal n2 sin theta 2, where theta 1 is the angle between the beam and the normal in the interface. And since it goes from lower refractive index to higher refractive index, it will bend to getting near towards the normal in the interface. And you will see the straw like this. I think it has broken because of this a change in the refractive index. So here let us assume that here this which water is an imaginary water that has a refractive index negative, not 1.3, but instead minus 1.3. What will happen? We said this is a forward wave, but here we will have this kind of backward refraction. Because, and this comes also from Snell's law, and 1 sin theta 1 equal minus n2 sin theta 2. So this will be the backward refraction, and you see the straw like this. Also, we can think about the lenses. Here, a normal lens which collects light, and it has a refractive index 1.55, it's made of glass. It will just collect the glass, the water, and the light on one spot. But here, if we replace the glass with an imaginary glass which has a negative 1.55, it will be in its place, because it's backward, it will be diffused light instead of collecting the light. So we should just go to a frame where I have here one media and another media, so I just put the glasses like this. So here Again, to epsilon mu friend. Here again, if we imagine this is the glass of water, and here is the air, and here is the normal material. We see the water, the flight that goes forward, and we have propagation inside the medium. If we go here, and this is our glass, and here we have two nucleus, one is air, and the other one is found the negative pressure index. We have this backward, and also we have propagation. But in these two media that I just mentioned, if one of them is negative, we will have total reflection, and if we go to quantum, we have some pairs in these directions. So what more about these materials? They also call left-handed materials. Why is that? Because if we think about conventional materials, naturally occurring materials, where epsilon and mu both are negative, the relation between the electric and magnetic and the propagation constant are right-handed. So E cross K cross E will be H. So I just do my hand right, K cross E, I will get H. So it's right-handed. But if we think about negative material or metamaterial where both are negative, then the relation between E, H, and K is negative. So it's a left hand right. So I do K cross E, it will give me the H in the opposite direction. So it's a left handed. Or I can just write it in this way. So in terms of the flux, energy flux in the plane where we know that energy carried by the Poynting vector. And the Poynting vector is simply the cross product between the electric and magnetic field. So on the conventional material, since K cross E give us H, also, which is E cross H K, so it's K in this direction, which is exactly the direction of the Poynting vector. E cross H is K. So we have H. Great. I'm more than Ready? Okay, so I can care about it, here I can care about so how we fabricate them. This material, think about this form of material, bulk material, will have no resonance. If we have a ring with an external field, we'll have a very weak resonance that we have the current flowing in the ring. If we have made this gap, we'll have a resonance because this gap will make like the ring will make like an insulator, like inductor, and this gap will make an capacitor. So we'll have a resonance frequency for 1 over square C. We can enhance this by several rings. Also, it's not necessarily to be a ring that will be a square. Negative epsilon, we can so these are ring resonators with negative mu. Negative epsilon we can fabricate it by rods in parallel like this. So obviously we can get negative epsilon by having symmetrical parts arranged periodically. We can have negative mu, we have rings arranged periodically. So this plus this will give us a material. Here again we can shorten our epsilon mu there again. So negative epsilon, negative mu will give these together. These are just equations to emphasize about this point. And I'll show you right away one circle. So here, this is maybe. So if we have only negative epsilon, so if we have only negative epsilon, we have no, this is FDD, so we have no transmission. But if we have also only negative mu, in this region we have no transmission. But if we have both of them, we'll have transmission. And I'll go to experimental result. This is like an experimental result. Sure, this is epsilon negative, no transmission. This is mu negative in this region. When mu positive, we have transmission. We have transmission mu positive. This region mu is negative, no transmission. But if we mix both, we will have transmission, as you can see, also violet. It has a lot of applications. Many of them in security, in defense, in medical, in communication, aviation. It has a very interesting characteristics like a very famous silvery lens, which is exactly reflects that light and collected in one point. There's no abbreviation or any distortion. Just to show how it works. It could be have a lot of application methodology and also modification of the cooking. What is the cooking about? Is that if I have an object and the normal light comes through, it's a normal media, we will know that there is disturbance because the waves just had some disturbances. So we know that there's something in the way. But in the cooking, if we surrounded the object with metamaterial, then you will not recognize any disturbance in the wave. So this is a cooking. You can hide the object with metamaterial. I have done a lot with metamaterial and sensors and sensor application and EVs. So what I do usually, this is like a sensor application. I do layers of different materials. One of these layers should include one of these metamaterials and discover how can I do enhance the robustness of the sensor. And of course, there are always equations and the plotting of these equations. And here we can see that this is the distance comparison with the practice index that I want to see. To sense, for example, in this picture, I want to sense any changes in this area above the media which has the material. So, what is MSV, I call it. So we can see that we can have some sense of the changes of the practice index. And as an example, also these are in the two-layer system. I have a graphene between the metamaterial and the liquid. Has been studied that what will happen to the plasma and the surface of the liquid material. But I added the graphene, which has the characteristics of the sigma and the 50 to study what will happen to the plasma and the surface, and I use it also as a sensor and equations. And also some graphs to show that here I can control the sensitivity as I change the parameters. So I said these metamaterials, they have more made by the experiments, the human made. We can control the parameters of this material. Control the materials, I can control what I want from them. Another example for a sensor, again the structure, the equations, and figures. So mostly that's what I do, and always I do something new by adding some other materials like our new structure like crystal, and also I use it in EVs to enhance their properties. And you can see by having this material get a 0 efficiency material, which is something we aim to have a high efficiency EVs. Also, I use it for transmission line. And this case, I hope to use transmission lines not only to transmit the light, also to enhance the light. So it works both as a transmitter, this the input, the red is the input, and the blue is the output signal, which has also amplified. So the transmission line, it's transmit the light and amplify the signal. So it has two functions. And by this, I could say that I do my lecture, and thank you for giving time to give my presentation. Please make it safe. Next speaker is to talk about the situation. You again, time.
I have my timer. I'll cut down whatever. Whenever you ring the bell, I'll stop. Let's stop. Microphone. Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am very glad to be here. We spoke here about in 2010, so I'm at the same place now. I really like to appreciate the efforts by the local host, led by Dr. Iqbal Chaudhry, and the wonderful team that hosted us, and also for Dr. Badran and Dr. Abdullah Musa and Dr. Atar Rahman, who have been close friends. So I really appreciate that effort. I had struggled in organizing the topic because it's a little higher level topic. It's not directed directly into my own research, but I'll try to come up with some perspective about the innovation campus and benchmarking, and some of the discussion that I have in the talk is actually has already been covered by Dr. Badran and Dr. Musa and others, even Dr. Atar Rahman. So I will skip some of those discussions. Defining the innovation, so the defining, I mean, there are different definitions of innovation. And so this one I took from MIT's innovation initiative. It's called process of taking ideas from inception to impact. One of the things that you notice in there is that there's no mention of technology. So it's basically could be any idea and taking it to the next level where it has a broad societal impact. And that's what we are looking at. So there are based now, there's a more trend in the US, and that's a model that could potentially be looked at, is to build innovation campuses. So the knowledge is being created, new knowledge is being created at other campuses, on the main campuses, but can you build a tech campus? And so there are some examples that I'm going to show. We already know some of these hubs, innovation hubs in the US and the UK that we are familiar with, the Silicon Valley and the like. So what I say is that economic development is a bedrock for knowledge transfer and the free flow of ideas among countries. And in this case, it will be a great avenue for our OIC countries to be the key to innovation. And Dr. Badran, you have been a strong supporter of that. And then the basic research, just like Engineers Without Borders or Doctors Without Borders, there has to be translational research in developing countries across borders. And I think Dr. Shinwari mentioned about the needs in the refugee camps and the like. Those are all our interest areas that we should come up with creative solutions to do that. And then also the fundamental research has a longer lifespan, and also and translational research may be only 3 years and the like. So the campuses that I was going to talk about are talking about bold ideas, willingness to take risks, and outward facing, action oriented culture and innovation. So one of them is the Discovery Partners Institute in Chicago. So, but it is built on the University of Illinois system, Urbana-Champaign, Chicago, and Springfield. But it also takes in Northwestern University and University of Chicago and other entities into it. And this one is a project being run through that DPI network by researcher faculties from Urbana-Champaign and other. And in this case, they were looking at wastewater. They're looking at the wastewater for COVID detection. So that was done. The other one we just got announced while I was on the plane to Islamabad, that the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, and you had mentioned about Zuckerberg again, Dr. Badran, the launch of a new biomedical research hub in Chicago, and that will bring together all these major universities in Illinois to coming up with challenges on 10 to 15 year time frame that we are talking about. So Bay Area, everybody is familiar with the San Francisco Bay Area. A lot of innovation and technology going on, and the innovation is strongly linked with academic research, and that's what you're saying. It's an academic research, knowledge gained, and then it's an innovation-based entrepreneurship. So you take the innovation and you have to make something out of it to be productive. So Cornell, again, most of you are academics, so you know Cornell University is located in Ithaca, so it's a remote area as compared to the New York City itself. So they have established a center or technology campus in New York City itself. So it's a new graduate campus for the digital age. And so I just borrowed this slide from Lance Collins, who just gave a talk in Urbana-Champaign about what is the Cornell Tech model, is that created for applied science competition and to combine the academic depth with the universities and to work with the industries. So, and then another example is the Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech again is located in Blacksburg, which is a remote area, but they have started establishing a campus in Washington, DC. It's called the Technology Campus. Again, so you have to see what's happening here, that the knowledge in itself has to go out, and these translational items that you had mentioned about and others, that it needs avenues, it needs system level approaches. So they have established a Virginia Tech model, Tech Campus in Washington, DC, because a lot of the industry are based there. So basically, it's advancing the art of the possible and improving the human experience. And all of you, including senior leadership at the ICBs and Dr. Bhatt and everybody, are familiar with the Singapore model, where they have the fusion pillars and the biopillars, and it works with industry and with the academia and the University of Singapore and others like that. That's a model. So one of the interesting things that I have seen from the University of Illinois is some of the smaller countries like Vietnam is coming in and engaging with University of Illinois or other institutions. So WinU University is based on the industry, and they have collaborated with the university to come up with WinU campus, and they're doing what we call a smart hospital. And similarly, TSMC, which is a leading chip manufacturer in Taiwan, they have collaborated with the Taiwan National University to come up with smart health or One Health. And so again, they are talking about biotechnologies and all this stuff. So, and then they're seeking out partners overseas that we're talking about. From University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign standpoint, that Nick Holinek is the master of all. He just died last year in fall. But he's the inventor of LED. So everybody's life has been touched by the LEDs, and your cell phone and your everything that we see is covered by that. And that's the kind of paradigm shifting technologies we're talking about. So you were talking about how these technologies have an economic impact. When you see this table, the table or chart here, we see that John Bardeen was the inventor of the transistor. And so now the worldwide market for it is about $17 billion. I say that if there was a single switch and you put it off, the world will literally stop, because everything is transistor, right? Aviation and whatever we do, laptop and lights and all the stuff. So this is the broad impact we're talking about. Then Jack Kilby and Paul Letterberg is magnetic resonance imaging inventor of that, and we know how prevalent MRI is for healthcare and the like. And Anthony Leggett and then Nick Holinek I talked about. So, I mean, these are examples, and then some of these coming out of the University of Illinois, like the PayPal and the YouTube. So everyone is using YouTube now, but they don't know that the fact that, yeah, it's the students from Illinois and others who contributed to that effort, including the first web browser and the like. So I mentioned this, so we need a paradigm shifting transformative phenomena and the building block for the microchips. We're talking about then using those for other devices. This is what the Islamic Development Banks, this is the goals, SDG goals were outlined. And so some of them look promising that they're achieved, some of it is 50% level in terms of peace and prosperity, but others are still to be worked at. So we have to come up with systematic implication and complementarities, invested thoroughly and not duplicate the efforts. So that is very important, not to duplicate the effort, but to have a comparison. So I mentioned this, the IMF is not a good word to use here, but this chart is derived from there, where the article citation continues to grow with the larger research, with the fundamental research as opposed to translational research. The other point that we made earlier also is engagement. It is very important not to have silos. And so that means that the public out there, in the US we call it the taxpayer. So, but the point is that, yeah, the public out there has to know what we are doing. And that's where we as such, as the fellows as such, the academy as such, and other entities like that should bring in the high school students and other common people to see what they are doing, and like have the open houses and the like, but also go to them. So, I mean, this is from the National Research Council, is basically saying how the innovation ecosystem, mix of mission-based agencies have to create a revolution in computing. So it started off with DARPA, the defense agencies and the like, and then it's most prevalent. So one of the key points that I'm trying to make here is, and I think there was a discussion again to it earlier, is these IUCRCs. industry university cooperative research centers. So the model is that the NSF started this program about 40 years or 50 years ago. There are 83 of these centers, partly funded by NSF, but mostly by industry. And each one is unique. So there cannot be more than 10% overlap with another existing center. So that is for sure. But it's run by academia, and academia has to partner with another institution, some of them even to the like a lower tier ones. So you have to bring them out, underrepresented minority students and the colleges and the universities. So that's a requirement. And then NSF just gives the operational money, but the industry then chips in $50,000 or $60,000 membership fee, and that goes directly into conducting translational research, industry-driven research. And so the overall vision is the nation's competitiveness workforce. So these have really spurred up economic development, and mostly, and then startups, and also working with the larger companies. So that's the number that I was talking about. So more than 180 universities are involved, 700, 800 industry partners, including consortiums and the like. So this is the model that we need. Our industry has to be integrated, and that's what the discussion in the earlier session, in the plenary session that was made, is that the industry has to. So most of the drug discovery projects are being done here, but we have to engage a lot of industry to come here. And I think there was mention of that some of them are present here. So again, this is again my pet, is we started another IUCRC, this was medical innovation in extended reality. That's a low hanging fruit. Anybody, they can be used to train the physician innovators, but they can be used for training other people and staff and so forth. So yeah, so in this case, we are bringing in all the. So I thought the Farishta has come near me to take my life. So Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and FDA. So regulatory body is part of those discussions. So when you sit on so they are looking at those. Mayo Clinic, the largest, the well-known, worldwide known clinic. And so this you did not say even more would not be a good idea. So this is another IUCRC, which I am part of also. Another one on the chips now. It's called the Center for Semiconductor Chips. So this one was the first one that we had. And so these are some of the companies on the right that you see, and the multidisciplinary people in the teams. So including ag engineers, electrical engineers, bioengineers, and the like. So these are from other universities, Berkeley Center. So One Health, we are already talking about One Health across the disciplines. So outside the major metropolitan areas, the potential for promoting economic development in the scope of resources is needed, which should be leveraged for the region. And so those are very much needed. I'll skip this. Think globally, act locally. So there's an article on that earlier. So the issue is not about creating Silicon Valley, but creating something which is useful to local conditions. So we do not have to do the ditto. Among this, I think there was a discussion on ethics earlier. So the integrity and reputation and culture of the research organization has to be above board to actually do that. So aspects to be considered is technical competence, expertise in organization, financial. My time is saying 5:47. Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay, yeah, that's exactly. So honesty and integrity and political stability of the government. So that's the other issue that we face, is that continuity across the governments is needed. So what are we talking about? We're talking about inventions, patents, copyrights, innovation, establishment of Office of Technology Management at each university. And therefore, here in Urdu or Punjabi, they call it Jugaad. And so the innovation is called Jugaad. So actually, the Aga Khan University runs a program, it's called Jugaad. So doing that. The other model that was proposed to me was the crowdsourcing model. So that could be used as an innovation partner. So you have an idea and throw it out and let people chip in money to help you develop that idea. So in the US, the way they acted was in 1980, these congressmen, Bay Dole, the two congressmen came together and translated a developed a legislation which requires that all universities have to have an Office of Technology Management. And that all the ideas that are funded by the federal governments in the universities has to come up and has to be open and has to be then copyrighted and then translated research into patents and not only papers only, but patents and invention disclosures. They also contributed some percentage across the agencies to SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR, Small Technology Transfer through the universities. So, and setting up of these offices, innovation parks, tech community, and so on and so forth. So benchmarking Muslim countries. So the eye-opener statistic for me was this, that the pandemic is estimated to have dropped 1 million additional people into extreme poverty. And the Muslim countries across about 25% of the world population, they count for approximately 40% of the people in extreme poverty. That's a big one. And these are from the reports there. This is one bright spot that's somebody, a student in Tajikistan, develop an AI-driven COVID research. So this I wanted to show this, but this is what this virtual reality program is. And so we have run these engineering and medical. So we have established the first engineering-based medical school in the country or in the world. So this is that engineers have started a school which the medicine people will come in and have to have a background in quantitative background, mathematical background to be inducted that. The mission is the future of healthcare is in technology. So these physicians are called physician innovators. So it was started, the first class graduated last year. So I am also part of this as assistant dean for research. These are the four the C's that they have to go with. Let's see. So we created this innovation ecosystem, which means that you are there in the center as an innovator, and then you have all the lab resources and other resources, 3D printing resources, and manufacturing resources, also training resources at your disposal. So these are the student groups. So one of the things that students were brought together, these include medical students, but they also included in the teams engineering students, not only engineering student, a business college student. Not only with that, but also a physician, residence physician or other physician. Not only that, but also a community member. So 6 to 7 people, 2 to 3 each, would participate in these teams and come up with the ideas. And then we give them, winning teams, $10,000 to develop the prototype over a period of a year and give them mentors. So each team is attached with 2 to 4 mentors. So these are different cohorts from the and even Project 5, and the number is a high schooler. So Project 5 is a high schooler. And so this was our inaugural cohort. These are community members, some and number 9 and like. So we did very well with the innovation system that we have. I'll just stop in a minute. So with these IPPEs, the Illinois Rapid Vent that was developed and is available. And I was very impressed with Dr. Iqbal's comment on that this the university provided 3,000 tests per day during the same. So I'm just going to go over. We have this robot that we talked about. So you have talked about Dr. Balram. So we have it. I'm not going to run it now. So he already. So this is my favorite picture because this is where we were, and some of you are in the picture. I know I talked to Dr. Romera earlier, and so she's here, and and Dr. Atiya Basi was our collaborator at that point, and Shahad also gave lectures and lab tests on nanoparticles. And this is our nanopower group unfortunately, Dr. Moni Naipe and Bulan, both of them actually fell sick. They bought the tickets and everything, and so you could see that. And so we have gone around the country or the Muslim countries to do that. So my recommendation is establish a research and innovation fund to seed project across OIC. Some of it is being done. Establish digital health and digital agriculture for digital solutions. Community engagement for the advancement of science and engineering. Engagement of experts. So engagement of experts is also useful. Yeah, so create awareness. So awareness is lacking. We don't see anybody from outside, so we are really sitting in a silo right now. Innovation-based entrepreneurship, failure is an option. So that was one thing hammered, and that's what we have told these innovation teams. Failure should not be used as a stigma. Failure is an option. When you're doing that, there are people who fail. People are afraid to fail. You should not be afraid. You should be able to try hard. And so I with acknowledgements on all these entities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Outstanding series and also fellow of Pakistan Agricultural Sciences. Many you can see his detailed CV on these topics functional nanomaterials for biomedical and pharmaceutical applications.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. I would like to specially thank Professor Tawarman sir, Professor Iqbal sir, and of course IAS to give me chance to share some of the points that is in this forum. My group basically work on metal and metal oxide nanoparticles, and use those nanoparticles as building blocks to design new materials for applications in renewable energy technologies, biomedical science, and environment. Today, due to lack of time, I will focus only on biomedical applications. So here is outline of what I will be talking about. I will start from the senses of metal and particles or nanoparticles, and then how these particles can be used for application with biosensing, drug for microorganisms or some drugs, and finally to address antibiotic space. We know that metal particles, nanoparticles can be used, prepared by different biological, chemical, and physical methods. We also know that properties of these materials are highly dependent on their size, shape, and surface chemistry. And in that regard, chemical methods are the most important ones because they are easy, they are reproducible, and you can easily control the size, shape, and surface chemistry of these nanoparticles using very simple method, chemical method. And among the chemical methods, chemical reduction approach is the most easiest one. In this case, what we do is we start from metal salts, reduce metal ions to metal atoms, and these metal atoms, due to their huge surface energy, they collapse immediately to make these smaller atoms. And these metal nuclei then grow during the course of reaction to make bigger particles. So basically, there are two processes, which is nucleation and growth. If you can control these two processes, then you can easily control the size, shape of these nuclei. For example, if we use some organic ligands which can bind the nuclei at very early stage, then you may end up with particles which are very, very small, even few atomic clusters. But if you use weakly bound kind of stabilizers, then you can let these nuclei grow to bigger particles. So once these particles are formed, they're still smaller than 100 nanometers. So again, they have huge surface energy. In order to reduce their aggregation to macroscopic materials, you need to stabilize them with some electrostatic stabilizers. In this case, what we do is we coat these particles with some charged molecules, ionic molecules. So all the particles, for example, they are either negatively charged or they become positively charged. And you know that similar charges, they repel each other, and due to that electrostatic repulsion, they stay away from it. So this is really important for biomedical applications because we can easily replace the loosely bound molecules at the surface with biomolecules such as DNA, proteins, antibodies, whatever we want to. But if you want to use these particles for nanoelectronics or for optical applications, you need to covalently attach these long chain molecules to nanoparticles, and these particles are extremely stable. You can dry them and keep them for years and use whenever you want. For this purpose, for example, to make extremely small nanoparticles which are smaller than 2 nanometer in most of the cases, and in some cases just few atom clusters, what we do is we design these kind of polymers in which a single polymer molecule would have multiple thiofunctions. Remember, this thiofunctional group is really important to make these smaller particles because it can make covalent interaction with different metals, especially gold and silver. So in this way, we were able to make copper nanoclusters, silver nanoclusters, gold, platinum, and actually many other metal nanoclusters that were really small, smaller than even 1 nanometer. And in this size regime, these metal particles do not behave as metals. They have metallic character if particle size is bigger than 2 nanometers, and if it is smaller than 2 nanometers, they start behaving as semiconductors. And even they can start behaving as metal molecules if particle size is smaller than 1 nanometer. So in this size regime, these metal particles, they become fluorescent in nature. And due to these fluorescent properties, they can be used for different bioimaging and biosensing applications. And we have actually used this. And the smallest nanocluster we made using these methods, that is nickel nanoclusters, that contains only 4 atoms, atomically monodispersed nanoclusters, or 6 atoms. They were found to be really useful for the production of hydrogen by water splitting. But that is not a topic for today, so I will not go into detail. So in addition to these smaller clusters, which are smaller than 2 nanometers, we also developed a variety of other methods in which you can produce particles which range in size from 1 to even 100 nanometers. For example, in this case, what we did, we used this thioether polymer, which has this carboxylic group to make these particles soluble in water for biomedical applications. By controlling the ratio of this polymer to gold, we were able to make in just one step method particles which were either 1 nanometer, 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer, or 4 nanometer. Extremely uniform particles in just one step. And these are among the most cited article of my basically in nanometer. In addition to these, so in using this method, we can prepare particles up to 5 nanometers. But if you want to prepare particles beyond 5 nanometers, then we can use these kind of stabilizers, which also act as reducing it. And again, all these are one-step methods. And using these methods, you can prepare particles that range in size from 5 nanometers to 100 nanometers. So in this way, we were able to develop a battery of protocols in which we can prepare these particles which are even lesser than 1 nanometer to up to 100 nanometers with perfect control over the size, shape, and surface. Now, what to do with these nanoparticles? They have extremely useful biomedical applications. For example, as I mentioned before, that these particles, especially gold particles, these are 4 different types of gold particles that simply vary because of their size. And due to their change in size, they have different colors, different optical properties. And this color is not due to homo-lumo transition, electronic transition from homo to lumo, as we see for organic molecules, but this is due to surface plasma gases, that is collective oscillation of electrons at the surface of the particles.
Okay, so how can these optical properties be used for biosensing, for example? In this case, what you see is these are gold particles, particle A and particle B. Both are coated with DNA fragments, and DNA fragment on particle A is non-complementary to DNA fragment on particle B. So if we mix them together, there will be no interaction because these DNA cannot recognize each other. But if you add a DNA fragment which can recognize the DNA on particle A and simultaneously can also recognize DNA on particle B, then it will act as a cross-linker and particle will agglomerate. And you will see visible change in color from red to blue. And this blue color shows that there is aggregation of these manufacturers. So in this way, by simply looking at the change in color by naked eye, you can say, yes, that DNA is there. And this method has actually been used to detect not only DNA, but different mutations in DNA. How? Because we know that double-stranded DNA stands interacted due to hydrogen bonding between nucleotides. And those hydrogen bonds are really weak. You can heat double-stranded DNA at certain temperatures, they will just separate. And that melting point usually is very broad, as you see in this blue curve. But if they're coated on metallic gold particles, this DNA melting point becomes very sharp, as you see over here. So by looking at the melting point of these aggregates of gold nanoparticles, you can see that how much base pair mismatch is there. So in this way, you can basically figure out base pair mutations and other type of mutations. So recently, this phenomena has been used to basically detect COVID virus. For that purpose, for example, you can functionalize gold nanoparticles with DNA that can recognize the RNA strands of COVID virus. And in that case, after you take the sample from the patients and add gold nanoparticles which are coated with DNA that can recognize RNA of the COVID virus, you will see visual change in color from red, purple to bluish, and then you will see the aggregates. And in this way, you can figure out, you can develop screening assay for the detection of COVID virus in different patients. Here in another method, what people have done is they have functionalized this gold particles with antibodies, which can recognize the membrane proteins or spike proteins of COVID. So by mixing them together, again, there is a change in color from red to blue. And this change in color, visual change in color, can tell you that, yes, you can use these particles for at least for the screening of COVID patients. There is a lot of interest to use these nanoparticles, especially gold nanoparticles, to develop lateral flow immunoassay, to develop point of care devices for the detection of different diseases. And we know that this method is commonly used in pregnancy strips in which gold nanoparticles coated with certain antibodies are used. And you see this change in color, if both lines are dashed, then the test is positive. And the same method has actually been used for detection of these nanoparticles. So one of the potential applications of these nanoparticles is for the detection of different diseases as well. For example, in this case, you have cationic gold particles, which are coated with fluorescent proteins or polymers. When these polymers bind electrostatically to these particles, the light emitted by these probes is absorbed by these nanoparticles, and the fluorescence is quenched. And this is the nanoprobe that you can use for the detection of different diseases. For example, whenever we have any disease, our body produces a variety of proteins, and those proteins can compete with the proteins on these nanoparticle surface. And if they are able to release those fluorescent proteins, fluorescence is recovered. So in this way, by quantitative measurement of quantitative recovery of this fluorescence, you can figure out that disease is there, and this has successfully been used for the detection of cancer. Similarly, it has also been used for detection of bacteria. In this case, for example, beta gal protein can convert this yellow substrate into nitrogen. But if this beta-gal protein is absorbed in gold particles due to change in conformation, its bioactivity is finished. But if you add some bacteria to this, these cationic gold particles they interact with more with the bacterial surface, and their fluorescence, their catalytic activity is recovered. But using proteins and gold particles for detection of bacteria is not a good strategy because both are very expensive. And for that purpose, we design basically iron oxide nanoparticles, which act as artificial enzymes. And they have redox properties very similar to horseradish peroxidase enzyme. And then we tune the surface of those iron oxide nanoparticles with dopamine in a way to develop their interaction with different bacteria. For example, when we add this iron oxide nanoparticles to yellow substrate, it converts it into red immediately. But if they are coated with this bacteria due to this ligand on the surface, then yellow substrate remains yellow. So in this way, you can develop simple method for the detection of bacteria in drinking water. But sensitivity is the issue. We were able to detect 1,000 bacteria per ml, but the target is to detect 100 if you really want to use it for commercial purpose. We also design various iron oxide nanoparticles by coating them with polymers which are rich in carboxylic group. And using the chemistry of this carboxylic group, you can conjugate different drugs, anti-cancer drugs, and see how they behave when they interact with the cancer cell. And in this way, we found that we can specifically deliver these drugs to the cancer cell by further modifying it with molecules which can recognize the receptors at the cancer. This is really very good approach, basically very similar to dialysis, in which you coat these iron oxide nanoparticles with lectin, mannose binding lectins, which can further recognize the pathogenic bacteria. And you can use this as artificial spleen to take blood out from the patient, pass through this column, and then back into the patient. So the particles in the column will simply remove the pathogenic bacteria. And I believe the same concept can also be used to remove cancer cells from blood cancer patients. So this is an interesting cartoon in which gold nanoparticles are being used as interesting robots that can scan your body and figure out where there is a problem. And then they can even, you can heat those regions where these particles are accumulated to release the drug and for that purpose. And recently it has been found that if particle size is bigger than 60 nanometer, for some reason they are easily taken up by the cancer cell. And we have designed so many materials like this one in just one step method, which can be used for this purpose. Yeah, so for all these applications, particles need to be very stable. And for that purpose, we designed this peptide, which you can coat on nanoparticles. And then you can further coat different kind of anti-cancer drugs or cell-penetrating peptides to use them for drug delivery applications. So there are so many concepts that can be used for the targeted delivery of these nanoparticles, especially gold, polymer nanoparticles, and liposome-based nanoparticles. And one of the serious health care issues these days is multi-drug resistance. We know that bacteria, as Professor Iqbal Chaudhry was saying, it takes billions of dollars to develop a single drug in 10, 15 years. But bacteria are smart enough to develop resistance against them very quickly. So, but these inorganic nanomaterials, they produce reactive oxygen species and mechanically damage the cell wall and cell membrane. So bacteria are still unable to develop resistance against inorganic materials. And for this purpose, we have designed both cationic and anionic kind of silver nanocrystals, which can kill many bacteria, which are otherwise very difficult to kill by traditional antibiotics. So in that dust bound. So in another case, what we did is we used to see that how the size of these nanoparticles, especially silver, affect when these bacteria are hidden in the biofilm. You know, it is extremely difficult to kill bacteria in the biofilm. And for that purpose, we use 2 nanometer and 10 nanometer particles to see how they can inhibit the protein fibrillation, which basically strengthen the biofilm. We noticed that this 10 nanometer is more effective to inhibit FAPC fibrillation, but still 2 nanometer are much more effective because due to their smaller size, they can easily penetrate through the biofilm and reach the bacterial surface. So finally, we have designed variety of porous materials, which in addition to some silver nanoparticles, we can tune the pore size and surface chemistry, and we can basically feed the water to remove inorganic nutrients, organic nutrients, and meanwhile kill the bacteria. And finally, I would like to thank all these institutions and funding agencies that have basically contributed. So thank you very much.
And next is on line of the Jackie. Dr. Dave has from the founding executive director, Nano Biolab, Research and Engineering, USA. She has received many prizes and awards, and the highlight is of Prize. He is an elected member of the fellow of the IAS, and she will be talking on design and synthesis of nanomaterials for energy applications. Dr. Dave online.
Should I share slides?
Yes.
Okay.
We can see you, can hear you, but we cannot see your slide. Yes, now we can.
May I start?
Please.
Okay, sorry, I can't hear you well, so I'll just assume it's okay. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. This is Jackie Ying. I'm with the Nanobiolab in Singapore, and it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you about nanomaterials for energy and biomedical applications. What we are trying to do in nanotechnology, obviously, is to harness the very unique size-dependent properties of this material. But in addition to that, what is really important is that we functionalize them for a variety of applications that ranges from catalysts for pharmaceutical synthesis, and also we are looking for materials for green chemistry and energy, nanomedicine and drug delivery, as well as three-dimensional cell culture, control tissue regeneration, as well as bioimaging sensing, diagnostic and drug screening. So for today's talk, I will focus on the first two topics, whereby we try to use different kinds of nanoparticles. They could be organic or inorganic. They could be porous, could involve a coating or dopant to achieve the properties that is desirable. Okay, let me start by giving an example on battery. For lithium-ion battery, you have the cathode and anode materials, and what we are looking for is a very high power density, good recyclability, and high energy density. Okay, so in particular, we're very interested in high capacity materials, and for cathode, people usually use a lithium cobalt or lithium iron phosphates, which has basically capacity of less than 200 mAh per gram. On the other hand, you have an anode material that has a low operating voltage, and graphite has a capacity of about 380 mAh per gram. We are very interested in looking at whether we can replace graphite. And one of the ways we can do this is to look at other kinds of nanosheet material that could be, instead of carbon-based material, could be metal oxides. So these nanosheets have a lot of interest because they can help to buffer the volume change, the accompany the electrocycling. They could have very high surface areas and improve the contact with the electrolyte. They could facilitate ion and electron transport, which will improve the rate capability. However, they're typically synthesized from exfoliation of layered material. And we want to have something that's more generalized using wet chemical bottom-up synthesis could be attractive, but typically this kind of synthesis involve hydrothermal treatment and time-consuming template removal. So that's not very attractive. We want to go beyond the few metal oxide nanosheets that have been reported in literature by going to this graphene oxide planar confined growth strategy that can be widely applicable. It will work with both layer and non-layered materials. It could be binary or ternary oxides. For example, using this graphene oxide and introducing the metal oxide precursor, depending on the calcination temperature and atmosphere, we can get a metal oxide with a reduced graphene oxide nanosheets. It is very versatile. It allows us to control the crystallinity and the content of the reduced graphene oxide. It does not require any complicated synthesis like chemical vapor deposition. It is easily scalable, no hydrothermal or laborious template removal process. Here is the first example where we're able to synthesize this binary oxide nanosheets made of niobium oxide. You can see that the material are very, very thin, and they were synthesized with controlled crystallinity depending on the calcination temperature. And if you use different precursor like a niobium chloride or a toxide as precursor, you can get different yields. Particularly high yield can be obtained with the alkoxide precursors. And using AFM, you can see that the nanosheet thickness is only about 2 nanometers. Okay? From there, we can generalize the synthesis to other binary oxide nanosheets. For example, iron, tin, nickel, cobalt, manganese, zirconium oxide. And again, we can control the crystallinity, crystallized size, reduce graphene oxide content, and surface area by the calcination conditions. The ternary oxide can also be obtained by this method. For example, here's a case of a titanium niobate. Once you have this variety of metal oxide nanosheets, you can test them for lithium-ion battery anode applications. So, for example, we looked at first the niobium oxide material with or without the reduced graphene oxide, and also with titanium doping. And the best result is obtained with the reduced graphene oxide. If you use a ternary oxide, you can achieve this very nice results very easily. Okay? And if you screen a whole bunch of different metal oxides with different mechanism, tin oxide with the reduced graphene oxide can give you tremendous capacity. So we're talking about well over 1,000 mAh per gram, which is superior to what we obtain with graphite. And this kind of performance just tells us that if you can create a nano toolbox and you can vary the composition, you can really achieve what you want with tailored performance. Okay? So I'll switch gear a little bit to talk about another example with energy application, which is direct methanol fuel cell. And here again, we have cathode and anode reactions going on. And what we want is to basically convert methanol to give us energy that can power laptop or cell phone. Okay? So the electrocatalysts basically allow us to enhance the kinetics of the methanol oxidation. So this is something that is very critical. On the other hand, we also need a methanol tolerant electrocatalyst with very high activity for the oxygen reduction reaction on the cathode. Okay? So usually people use noble metals for this kind of reactions. And what we want is we want to save the costs associated with noble metals. So we only want like a core shell structure where only the shell is made of these noble metals. And then secondly, with this core shell structure, we can use a core that is made of different metals, and it can give rise to effects of shape and strain by tailoring these core metal structures. Okay? So for example, you can make a silver nitrate material and obtain a icosahedral nanoparticles on which you can coat the platinum. And you can do the same thing with decahedral gold nanoparticles, and then you coat it with platinum. And lastly, you can obtain gold copper nanorods and then you coat it with platinum. In the process of coating these different core structures with platinum, you can basically expect to increase the particle size slightly, but basically with just a few monolayers of this platinum. Okay, so for example, we increase the silver nanoparticles slightly in dimension as we coat platinum, and same thing with gold and the gold copper. But in the process, you don't change morphology, right? And what is most important is that the core structure is something you can tailor. For example, silver has a smaller lattice parameter, a larger lattice parameter than platinum. And as a result, it creates a very high tensile strain on the platinum. So this will affect the interatomic spacing of the platinum, and therefore affect how the reactants absorb on the surface of platinum, and also how the products dissolve on the surface of platinum. Okay? Now, if you go to gold, gold is still have a slightly larger lattice parameter than the platinum, but it is not as large as silver. So you have a moderate instead of a high tensile strain. And gold copper, on the other hand, has a slightly smaller lattice parameter than platinum. And what you end up with is a low compressive strain. Okay? So what is possible here is that the ability to tailor different kinds of core shell structure for the methanol oxidation reaction. In particular, we can see that the gold copper as a core shown in blue can give rise to better activity than gold, and which is in turn better activity than silver. And in particular, we can see that if you have the shell as platinum rhodium, you get much higher activity than all the others. In fact, if you compare it to platinum ruthenium, you notice that there is a 7-fold increase in current density. So in electrocatalysis, this is very, very exciting, because typically for catalytic results, right, if you're able to improve things by 10, 20%, that's tremendous. Here we're talking about increasing it by 700%, right? So why does it have such good activity? It's really because the core structure of gold copper basically creates a low compressive strain on the platinum, okay? And in turn, this gives rise to better, superior activity. Okay? Now I want to shift gear a little bit to talk about one last example, which is how we can generate antimicrobial agents. So I'm shifting gear to talk about something that's very different. And here we all are aware that drug resistance basically is developed with the use of non-conventional antibiotics. And when people get oversubscribed with broad spectrum antibiotics, there's a great rise in the superbugs that is then really difficult to cure. So there are over 90,000 deaths per year in the US alone that's attributed to this bacterial infection. And very often if you stay in the hospital, you pick up this skin infection that is deadly associated with MRSA. Right? In addition, people with transplants or implants, basically, they could have bacterial formation on the surface of this implanted device and facilities. And this forms a biofilm that's really a problem. It can create major issues and can lead to the requirement, for example, of revision surgery. Okay? So when people get hospitalized, they end up getting this infection in US alone associated with bacterial infection of 42,000 associated with hospitalization picked up the bacterial infection. This leads to significant added healthcare costs per person. The treatment costs for antimicrobial agents basically is more than $40 billion globally. And on top of medical treatment, there's a great need for antimicrobial agents in the global market for personal care on the tune of more than $10 billion. Okay, so because there has been very few new antibiotics developed, FDA has offered to fast track the new antibiotics. For example, we have been developing this imidazonium material as a polymer with a backbone that is positively charged. We were interested in this because we were interested in creating a structure that can then be turned into a polycarbines as a very interesting organocatalyst. And from there, we can introduce metal ligands to make a polyorganometallic catalyst. Okay, but the imidazole itself, the polyimidazole itself, can be engineered to give you a very useful antimicrobial agents using this positive charge at the backbone of the materials. The way this positive charge works is that it will latch onto the negatively charged cell membranes of the bacteria and then pierce a hole through it, and then as a result, the contents of the cells leak out and you kill this bacterial cell without allowing it to develop any drug resistance. Okay? But first, how do we synthesize it is to basically use linker groups between imidazole building blocks. If we use a linker group that is this 2,4,6 tris bromometalmacetylene linker, then the particles that obtain is very well defined instead of something that's ill-defined in the first picture. Okay? And this network polymer could have also very interesting morphology. Both linkers are this macetylene linker. Okay? And if you use a chiral imidazole, then you end up with a chiral polymer. You can stop the reaction for this polymerization so that you end up with a nanoparticles instead of micron-sized particles. And the first material obtained is this polyimidazole ionic solid particles. And when you reduce it, you get polycarbene catalyst, and you can further introduce a metal ligands to get polyorganometallic particles. This I mentioned already can be very powerful. But focusing on the polyimidazole ionic solid materials, you can use it to pierce a hole in the membrane cell shown on the top, right? So that you basically prevent the cells from developing any drug resistance. Now, one of the worst things that can happen to your eyes is this fungal keratitis infection that a few years ago there was a major outbreak because there were some issues with the eye drops that were, well, okay, the buffer that was used to clean the contact lenses. Okay, so as a result, basically you have this fungus growing into the cornea, and these are shown as black dots in this pink background. Okay, so if you don't treat it, it becomes something that can be very severe. It can actually lead to blindness. If you treat it with one of the most commonly used drug, which is this fluconazole, right? You get rid of some of this infection, but you still have a lot of this fungus invasion into the cornea. If you use a polyimidazole salt, you can see that we are able to kill most of this fungal infection. It's more effective than fluconazole, and it's also much less expensive. Fluconazole also has a major issue with shelf life. Okay, it cannot store for very long unless, and no more than 1 week even when refrigerated, whereas our polyimidazole salts basically don't have these issues. It is very inexpensive and can be stored at room temperature. So with this approach, we have able to get a broad spectrum activity through the membrane disruption. It allows you to kill the microbial pathogens, not only the gram-positive bacteria and fungus, it can actually kill gram-negative bacteria. So this is very exciting because there are relatively few antibiotics that work well with gram-negative bacteria. Doesn't allow for drug resistance from developing, and our work, especially that with collaboration with IBM, basically has been noted by Scientific American as 10 world-changing ideas. The materials that we end up with is non-toxic, no skin irritation, biodegradable, and also eco-friendly. It prevents biofilm from forming and it's low cost. And the holy grail, of course, is to try to treat things like TB, MRSA. But the low-hanging fruit that we have been working on are the coatings on medical devices and hospital wards. And in particular, we are also interested in using this as disinfectant preservatives in personal care products. Okay. Last but not least, I hope to have given you a sense of what we're trying to do. We want to make these nanomaterials and nanosystems and specifically functionalize them, tailor them to address complex problems in medical application like drug delivery system, nanomedicine, biomaterials, cell culture substrates, and then we have been using them for a variety of diagnostic applications like biosensors, nanoprobes, paper-based assays, molecular diagnostics, and also drug and food screening. And last but not least, we're interested in using them for battery fuel cells, catalysts, and more recently as agri-tech applications. Thank you very much for your attention. I want to acknowledge all the staff who have been working on this, especially Ayman, who did a very nice work on nanosheets, and we are funded for NanoBioLab under the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, a national lab in Singapore. Thank you very much for your attention. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sort of time, so we are skipping question part, so it can be the one. Our next speaker is Professor Dr. He is fellow studying at
Sorry, I really can't hear you well. I'm assuming that I'm done, and I can see Noah is ready for the next. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello. Okay. Our next speaker, Professor Evan, he is talking about the multidisciplinary BS degree in nanoscience and nanotechnology. There is growing academic and social knowledge involved. Professor Evan Burke is running Institute University of Texas, and he has so many awards and competitions in his career that you can go and read in detail just small biography on page on page number 68.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Over to you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's my great pleasure to thank my very good friends, Professor Badran, to invite me to this conference, Professor Rahman, and Professor Chaudhary. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief because people are hungry now. I think we'll go to the lunch. But anyway, I'll try to finish it very quickly, the central part. The new ideas which have been proved successful over the experience of 10 years. This is summary of it. And that idea is that normally BS degree in all universities is one subject, 16-year education in general, physics, chemistry. But this is a new concept. In 2010, we started this new concept of having multidisciplinary degree, of combining different subjects which are needed, particularly for nanotechnology. And this was a concept internationally going on at the time. In 2009 or 10, when we sort of started giving an education in nanotechnology, because nanotechnology was an industrial revolution. And we thought that there is now a need of the proper qualified people in this field to contribute best to this game-changing technology. So that was the concept, and therefore, this nanotechnology they did several subjects, and therefore, instead of one subject, we thought that at 16-year education level, we should have multiple subjects. And there were different concepts that we worked at the time. Two subjects were physics and chemistry in this degree, with practical and theoretical courses, of course, or three subjects. But we had a thinking of combining 4 subjects. And the good fortune was that we had a faculty, very strong faculty of 7 full professors retired from different organizations, having now 30 years of experience. And that was one advantage to me. And the other thing was that we had only new technology. The students are not very many, 15 to 20 students maximum. So one professor and 10 to 15 students was a very good teaching ratio. These are the 2 main factors, and I'll quickly go to the first ever in Pakistan. The initiation of nanotechnology was elected by me in 1995, very early times. And the second occasion was a very important conference which the Islamic Academy of Sciences had in Islamabad in 2002, where I gave a review of the nanotechnology at the time. So Pakistan was just getting into this new concept, and Alhamdulillah, now all over Pakistan there are about 50 universities doing nanotechnology. Let me acknowledge Professor Taur Rahman at the time when I proposed this in early this century, nanotechnology in Pakistan. He was the science minister at the time and supported this vehemently and funded this project in the early beginning. And therefore, we have good fortune of this technology at the moment. Certainly, there will दूसरा अपने लोग बैटरी को Okay. So this is the first, this was 20 years back slide when I was flying with Dr. Arman from Islamabad to Karachi, and we proposed this planning commission. There is a program in Pakistan. Whenever we propose a certain new project, it has to be given to the government of Pakistan. And so I gave him this proposal of about 20-30 pages. And in 2 years travel from Islamabad to Karachi, he did all this correcting himself. And that is his own handwriting. And that's the yeah, you see his own handwriting, development, and he changed even the topic. And then this one of the early slides, which he even changed the funding calculations. So that's we are very indebted to Professor Kaur for this new technology starting in Pakistan. Mine was only idea was supported greatly. Anyway, word over there are different concepts of this education. This slide is 2004, and we had this new projects which Professor Kaur funded in Pakistan at the time, something like 900 million rupees. So what is important? I will go quickly because this is the two very important basics for the new youngsters. The two aspects, scientific and socio-economic importance. And one is the scientific of this nanotechnology, and that's the surface to volume ratio. The basis of it has been explained very well. And the other is an industrial revolution. I think some people estimate $1 to $2 trillion in the nano project. And therefore, it's a game-changing technology and of great importance. And therefore, it has a great socio-economic importance relevant to the current. The other, you can see that even in the global context, in fact, there are products, something like 2,500 products of application of nanotechnology for society already available. So that's a very important aspect which we want to convey to these. And it's an industrial revolution as is normally known. And therefore, we have to be having the effect of this for the next 40, 50 years. It's a game-changing technology from that point of view already. The multidisciplinary nature comes from its applications to all types of industry. And that's whatever industry you see, the small nanoparticles are affecting that industry. And you see the career of these new graduates in nanotechnology covers many fields. And that shows the multidisciplinarity which is needed in this proper education in this field. So why is there is a need for nano education, new concept? It's an industrial revolution. It meets the needs of the industry, R&D institutions, and several places. And therefore, we need the properly qualified and trained human resources. So this is the basic central point of today's discussion. So world over, there were different countries starting their programs for BS degree, in which we are concerned now, and even higher degrees and research. But anyway, I will concentrate on the BS level degree in several countries at the time. This is a little old slide. So And world over, there were multidisciplinary concepts going on. And you see, this is in 2010, there are only 13 institutions in the world which has a multiple degree, multidisciplinary degree. But now there are over 100. So the great requirement of this development over the last 10 years in the concept of multidisciplinarity of education at BS level. So why does it come as a multidisciplinary from the point of view of the subject? Whether it is physics, chemistry, biology, nanotechnology is central, requiring all these subjects. We have tried to combine physics, chemistry, biology, and material science. But there is in future, I think there is concept, there is a need at this level. I'm not talking of the higher level of education, but BS level. There would be a need. Already some people are combining engineering with this. But maybe physics and engineering, chemistry and engineering with nanotechnology. But we are having results of 10 years, very good results of these combining these four subjects. So in Pakistan, the first initiative, the only one in the country, four subject degree program is at our university. We started in 2010, just in the university. So in summary, nanoscience and technology, this multidisciplinary based degree consists of four subjects, and INSET is the short name, President Institute of Nanoscience and Technology is holding this this degree. So as I said, the advantages of our degree is that we have very good professor to student ratio, 15 to 20 students and one professor, very experienced one. And now these are the subjects, 43 subject courses which are taught in 132 credit hours. The advantage is that we have cut down certain higher level teaching in physics, chemistry, and given the basic, very important part, so that the student is not very much loaded with at least 132 credit hours of the course in 4 years' time. And you see, the interesting part is that instead of, in addition to, we have 2 courses of 3 credit hours of social impact of nanotechnology, which is very important. Not very common in teaching in Pakistan, particularly. The social sciences are taught to the engineers and scientists, and we have 6 credit hour courses along with 132 credit hours for this degree. So that's the new advantage of this, the social aspects of this technology. And this is the faculty you see all with great people. He was the faculty of Dean of Biological Sciences at Biology University, very well-known university in the country, Professor of Chemistry Department, and these people are from the Atomic Energy Organization. So we had a fortunate, these very high quality teachers, and they produced high quality students. And the result was, we had an excellent success over 10 years' time. We started in 2010, and our graduates started coming up from 2014. And by now, we have produced 65 graduates of this multidisciplinary nature in nanotechnology. And lo and behold, they have got about 97% fully funded scholarships across the world. Very rare thing. And this is because of these 2-3 factors which I mentioned. And I just wanted to convey this idea to us, that this is a new area in which OIC countries should at least pay attention to, that instead of one subject BS, particularly for nanotechnology application, they should have multi-subject courses at BS level, which is 16-year education in international terms. So the result was that our students, our alumni, all them, when they got to higher studies of MSN at home and abroad, they won a lot of medals, because they had a very strong base of the subject. And even in Pakistan, doing MS in good university, our students got gold medals, and even in subjects of management sciences. This student did a nano degree, but went to management and got the gold medal in the whole university. So that's the base we have produced in this multidisciplinary education. They got cash prizes, and for example, this girl got the medal in her MS, beyond our expectations. And the president of Pakistan giving the, she did management courses in the new university for MS, but got the gold medal with a scientific base, but doing arts. Again, so this is the variety of things. This is not words, this is the words. The computer makes so much and these errors, and if you are not careful, you have this. Anyway, so this is the detail. Anybody can talk to them. How did they get this scholarship? Different countries, they got the amount of scholarship, something like 430 million rupees, which is, I think, a huge amount compared to Pakistan. It's not from the government of Pakistan. They have earned from other countries their money, from America, from Japan, and from South Africa, from Russia, and so on. So this is, I think, the advantage we had of this adventure. And 10 years we kept quiet. We didn't talk anything about it, but now we can talk when the tangible results and documentary results are there. So that's the, even in one good thing was that we had a good connection with China. The best center of China, Nano Center in Beijing, Chinese Academy of Sciences. And there, they gave us 3 scholarships fully funded every year to my graduates. 1-to-1 partnership with the Chinese Academy of Sciences and this institute, and 3 fully funded scholarships per year. And just 30 students of my graduation are already there. And they extended this first 5 years, and then 3 years, and then 3 years, because they thought that the students are very good and we want to extend this cooperation. And fortunately, we got this, another student got the director of that center's award this one. And one of our students was representing the whole graduation ceremony of all countries, including Chinese students, and he was selected to address to their graduation ceremony after 4 years. So that's the quality of Dr. Kamran. He did his PhD with 19 publications during PhD. In high factor journals like 27, 15, good quality, 19 papers is not a joke. And the third, 3 of them already have done PhD. The other students published 16 papers, the third one 16 papers. With, the standard is of course high, with high impact. So I'm just going to finish it, and we got the certificates of merit, excellent international graduate student, because several other countries take their students there. So this future convergence, what we are thinking is that different disciplines of science are converging as scientists have common and overlapping interests, multidisciplinarity. And then entrepreneurship will promote as unification of most of these branches of engineering technology based on unity of nature at the nanoscale. God is one. So anyway, this is just an analogy. But then oneness is very important in particular this. And it has a great application of social, ethical, and safety standards. So this, in the conclusion, the multidisciplinarity degree is a new concept, I think, for getting best contributions to this technology is that we should have multidisciplinary teaching of these students. And they prove very good for higher studies. And most suitable, why this at base level? There are higher studies in education. Why this particular? Because this is an entry to most jobs in our country, particularly in our Pakistan. In going to industry, in going to teaching, in going to different job requirements. If they don't want to continue higher studies, they go to job. But this is very important because they have a wider base. So this is a very important stage of that for every education. And variety of subjects they are teaching. They have already demonstrated significant effects in various industries, including healthcare, and therefore, this last one, in conclusion, is shaping the next industrial revolution, which will have the far-reaching consequences for society as a whole. Thank you very much. This is the last one. very brief answer, and I hope. Thank you.
They don't.
I have a couple of housekeeping announcements. We start the session at 3 o'clock with the panel discussion. So I suggest that all of you can be with us.